Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:17 p.m. Directors Step, Ramirez, Torres, Teitler, and myself are present, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreters. Our interpreters on Zoom, Astrid and Yaneth, will share the interpretation instructions with our participants, and then we can turn on the interpretation function. We're good. Thank you. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
Do you have a proposed adjustment? The consent agenda. I am wondering if we can move the approval as it does say. Sorry, let me get there. There's 7 resignations and it says, please review letter. Please send a letter of resignation for us to review. I don't see a letter of resignation for us to review before we can approve. Is that something that we can get at least for those 7 before we approve the consent agenda? So then can we wait for approval until after we can?
We haven't seen that note on the personnel item before. So is that something that we can expect moving forward, or is it something that?
For themselves. Okay, thank you. Right, I had not seen that before, and so I didn't want to approve something that was said. Please review the letter of resignation if we were supposed to be reviewing that before we made an approval.
I do have a motion to move policy GB.
Can we wrap up Director Torres' motion first? Does your motion stand or do you want to withdraw it?
I'm comfortable with withdrawing it as long as that does go to HR.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Then yes, I'm good with that.
Director Ramirez.
I would like to make a motion to amend and move policy GBGG to our next board meeting.
I'll second that motion. We want time to ensure that the language agreed upon in IBB is reflected in this final policy being presented to the board. This is the policy that was brought to classified staff to ensure that it would apply to all staff within the district, or a second policy was potentially on the table to be created if it didn't apply to all staff. The districts brought this to classified staff. They've agreed upon some language. We want to make sure that the edits that were in the document that was agreed upon in IBB have made it into the final policy being presented to us. And it was flagged. And so we just want to give it time. So I would second this motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So directors, you've just approved the agenda as amended with the removal of policy GBGG from the consent agenda. The next business in order is opening celebrations and updates by our Superintendent, Dr. Rodriguez.
Hi, thank you. The first thing that I want to shout out is just a thank you to the Portrait of a Graduate and Core Values design team. We have a pretty representative group of parents, staff members. We have a student who's volunteered their time to be a part of that group. And we tried to make sure that we had a representative group from Basalt, as well as from Carbondale, as well as from Glenwood Springs, as we begin to think about what we value as an entire school district. And also so that we can, create this Portrait of a Graduate, our North Star, in collaboration across the diverse needs and values and perspectives of our school district. We had a survey out and we got back about 230 responses, which is pretty neat. And about half of them were students and half of them were adults, including alumni, current parents, staff members, community members, etc. The survey is actually still open. So we we wanted to make sure that if folks still wanted to take it, you still can. We will still code your data. Last week, our design team coded over 1,000 pieces of data, which was really neat just to see some of those values. So I just wanted to shout out the design team and also thank everyone who took the time to submit the survey response and encourage those who haven't to still do that. Then this is just a quick I guess update, but as many of you know, this year I was honored to be able to participate in professional learning through the Rural Superintendent's Academy, which is in its second cohort. I'm part of cohort 2. There's 14 of us, 12 are sitting rural superintendents. And I think one of the things that I've learned this year with them is we have some challenges that are very unique to our rural school districts that other districts just don't have the same challenges. And it's been a really great opportunity for me to learn and grow, collaborate with partners across the state. And tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, I'll be in Canyon City for our final convening of the year. So we'll wrap up our learning on Friday. And just wanted to give an update on that. As many of you saw on Friday and on Monday, also just want to shout out our team, especially our CFO, but our entire team who prioritized dollars to go to our classified staff for increases. They'll be seeing an increase of 5% starting next month that is retroactive. So just wanted to shout out our team, and then also as a sign of gratitude to all of our classified employees that we appreciate you for everything that you do. Last week, the Equity Advisory Council meeting met, and it was the final meeting for this school year. We got a lot of good feedback from that group, including discussing recent events that this group wants to, play a role in leading some resolutions for in the future. So I'm excited for those conversations, and especially just the feedback that we get from our students. I think our young people are the closest to, that student experience, and we just learned so much from them. As you all saw also last Friday, that our Chief Operations Officer, Jeff Gatlin, is moving on a similar role, but in Jeffco, so a larger system. And that is not a celebration, but I wanted to celebrate Jeff and thank Jeff for all of his work. It's been a real pleasure to work with him this year. And I keep telling him. And so if y'all get a chance to, bend his ear a little bit, tell him he can change his mind and stay if he would like to. And then last is a shout out for one of our teachers, Eric Lamb, teaches ELD at Roaring Fork High School. Last week, they premiered a couple of songs that he helped some of our ELD3 students to compose, and they're online. We can share them. I think they're actually really good. And I just wanted to thank him for, going above and beyond supporting our students and their language development in this really cool, creative way. And so thank you, Eric. That's all.
Thank you. The next business in order is a presentation on the proposed health curriculum adoption presented by Chief Cole. Oops.
I brought my water because it's a hot one. Well, let's dive in. So these are actually slides that you all have seen during our work session. And I want to pop to the first slide, if that's okay, Kels. Oh, I guess I can do it. Yeah.
Is your mic on?
I don't know. Does that sound better?
I don't think so.
Yes.
Okay. Kels, I don't know that this is working. Okay. So this was a question that we started with when we initially talked about the health curriculum curriculum recommendations. And we're not going to do it tonight. We're not going to have this conversation, but I want to start here and pause here and do a little bit of framing, because we started the conversation with a really personal question. And what you're going to hear tonight, and I want us to remember, is that this is a really personal topic for a lot of our kids, for our families, for our teachers. this work has elicited a lot of strong emotions from all sides that are involved. It brings up moral, ethical, religious values. It brings up questions about the roles of public schools. It brings up questions about the role of education. You're going to hear a lot of, we've heard it already. We've heard it since this work started. You're continuing to see it in public comments that have been written. You'll hear it tonight in the in-person public comments. Folks feel really passionate about this. It is personal, and it brings up a ton of questions. And so I do want us to pause and frame and just reflect on and come to this conversation with a great deal of gratitude for where we live. Both of my grandparents were very small business owners. One owned a shoe store and one owned a grocery store. And in my house growing up, what we were taught was like, you don't talk about politics because, that's not great customer service. And we are a long world away from that, where in our day and age, like we live our politics. It's all over people's cars and their front porches. We live in communities sometimes that are so bubbled with politics, that folks can live in a community where no one has a different opinion than they do. And we're really lucky. We're not Florida and we're not California. And we're lucky to live in a community where we still have a diversity of political opinions and opinions on things like comprehensive sexual education in schools. And we're lucky to have that diversity of opinion, and we're lucky to have these kinds of public spaces where we can respectfully hold space for each other. And I think just want to frame this tonight that let's remember that opposition isn't disrespect. And let's find ways to move forward together courageously as leaders, but stronger because of the hard conversations we have. When our curricular adoption committee came together and looked at the Colorado Comprehensive Health Standards, it's pretty clear that we do not have to teach comprehensive sexual education in the Roaring Fork School District. But our team, which was made up of volunteer staff from across the district, a lot of different positions are represented, really aligned with the state statute. And so I'm going to read a little bit of the piece of the Comprehensive Human Sexuality Education state statute that guides us, that our team really aligns with. The General Assembly further found and declared, and this is from 2019, that there is a need to continue and expand efforts to ensure that all young people in Colorado have access to evidence-based, medically accurate, culturally sensitive, and age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education, information, and resources to guide them in making informed decisions about their health and relationships. Additionally, schools need to promote healthy relationships through age-appropriate, culturally sensitive, and comprehensive human sexuality education, including providing information and resources for early intervention and response strategies to teen dating violence. So our team felt that given this choice of not having to teach or getting to teach comprehensive human sexuality, that we aligned with this statement, and we believe that committing to offering comprehensive human sexuality education is also in alignment with our role as a school district. Our district has a mission to make sure that kids thrive. We know that goes beyond academics. I sit here and the teams that I support, and the fact that this district has a role like mine shows that we care about other things in addition, in support of academic and support of kids thriving, right? We invest in a family resource center to make sure kids and families have access to wraparound services. We partner with the school-based health center to make sure kids have access to integrated health services. We partner with the Hope Center in our towns and communities to make sure there's community mental health providers in our schools. So in a lot of ways, we see this as also part of our responsibility to make sure kids have access to this kind of information. So I just want to frame a little bit of that before we jump in, and I won't go into all the details of all the slides because we've seen them, but just want to remind us that it's a privilege to be able to hold space for these difficult conversations. We're going to be grateful for it. And we're also, as leaders, going to courageously move forward, better informed and also shaped as we move forward by having hard conversations and listening to each other. Sound good? Okay, so let's get into it. Kelsey, we go to the next slide. So one of the things, we don't have to teach comprehensive health education. If we do, We are required by state statute to make sure that whatever we do, parents have the opportunity to opt their students out. We have to be able to provide information, detailed, substantive outline of topics and materials that are presented, and give parents that option to opt out. So I just want to really lay that groundwork that when everything we're talking about is going to be a choice for families of whether they want their students to participate in this or not. Let's go to the next slide. And you can jump through these, Kels. This kind of summarizes where we actually teach health right now in the Roaring Fork School District. The only required consistent place where health education is offered in the district is the one semester high school health class that's a graduation requirement. We do have curriculum that we've adopted previously around social emotional development. That's a component of health education. Second step, it's really preschool through 6th grade. We have PE. We have some health classes in our middle schools as electives. One of the things that we were really trying to address here was a gap for like even that required high school health class doesn't have a curriculum that we've approved. And so we really felt we needed to bring that forward to you all. We needed an updated curriculum. We also feel like a lot of the work we've done to support our LGBTQ+ kids, we needed updated, inclusive, comprehensive human sexuality education and curriculum. One of the big resources, part of how we funded this work and supported the Curricular Adoption Committee is through a grant through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Comprehensive Human Sexuality Education Program. This is our process timeline. A lot of our process timeline, and if you jump to the next slide, Kels, actually I'm back. Our timeline. And the pieces was of how we've come to these recommendations and brought these to you is mimicked very much so off of the same cadence and timeline of the math curriculum adoption process that you also approved this year. You'll see on the next slide our team. And then on the next, this was our adoption committee. And the next slide really talks about the stakeholder engagement process. And I want to pause here again, because I know we've received feedback that this process felt not clear enough, maybe not promoted enough. Again, we followed almost to the T, the exact same outreach and marketing steps and communication steps as the math curriculum adoption process. So super open to hearing that there's additional feedback that we need to get, but want to just say that it was all modeled. And if anything, we went beyond the community input sessions and staff input sessions, then the math curriculum adoption process. But here that you know, people do miss things that happens across our work in the district and communications. So certainly open to that, but that's where this process came from. And it seemed the reason we copied that was because I know the board was really happy with how that process was kind of unfolded this year. And I do want to pause too. We're going to hear some more public comment, but a big part of this process was hearing public comment. So want to address that we've heard from all sides of supporting this curriculum and specifically the comprehensive human sexuality education. Nobody's really said anything about comprehensive life skills. That great text, so they don't get much attention on that one. But we've heard a lot of feedback on all sides of this. I would say across the board. Families who provided feedback, no matter if they were in support or not in support of this curriculum, had some shared values around transparency, around access to the curriculum. People across the board share our belief and commitment that parents are really the core educators when it comes to comprehensive human sexuality education. And really wanting to make sure that we're doing this work with parents and supporting them. We heard a lot about family values. We heard cautions from all sides about not being political in the way we make these recommendations. And we also heard a lot of all our families really wanting us to really support a robust opt-out system. In terms of opposition, what we've heard and what we'll probably continue to hear is questions around the role of schools. And is this really our job to be doing this? We've heard questions about whether or not this kind of curriculum is developmentally appropriate. We've heard concerns about specific lessons. So families were getting into the curriculum and really calling out concerns about specific lessons and questioning the developmentally appropriateness of those lessons. And we also heard questions about when and how content around gender identity is introduced and whether that should be done at all. In support of the curriculum, we heard a lot around supporting just that it was updated. We haven't had an updated curriculum since Draw the Line came out, and I think that's about 15 years old. We heard a lot about in support of the fact that the 3 R's curriculum is inclusive for LGBTQ plus students. And a lot of folks that felt similarly to the curriculum adoption team that this curriculum was aligned to the state statutes around comprehensive human sexuality education. And I would say somebody, one of our public commenters asked a really good question that I really appreciated. So I want to actually share my response with you, which was like, if you heard oppositional comments, have you shifted your recommendations based on that? Like, or are you just, is it kind of token? Are we just hearing opposition? And I would say there's a couple things that have shifted in the work because of public comment. One thing, our initial curricular recommendation had 2 curriculum that we were promoting for or recommending for comprehensive human sexuality education. And we pulled one of them because of concerns around access. It just wasn't as accessible to families to review, to look at, and to really get in their hands on it. So we pulled that out of the recommendations for you all. Another piece that, you know, when folks would ask about, like, tell me more about the opt-out process. What's the protocol? What's the kind of, what are the regulations around that? Well, we don't have those as a district. We don't have a template or a letter. And so one of our kind of AHA's next steps was we're going to standardize that. We're going to standardize the expectations of how much in advance parents should get that notification, what that notification should look like, how we facilitate ease of access to the curriculum, to the actual lessons that we're going to be teaching. So that's another piece that shifted. And then I think, you know, a lot of where you'll see in the next steps, there's no way our schools can teach this entire curriculum. And so a lot of the feedback that we've received, there's a whole chunk of work where our team has to determine a scope and sequence. Like, we're not going to be able to do all 27 lessons. We might have time to do 1, 2, maybe. And so the team is going to try to is going to recommend, these are the most important lessons. And certainly the questions that we've heard about what is developmentally appropriate, can we clarify actually which lessons you're teaching? We've really taken those into account and really tried to answer those even when we're making choices and recommendations about which curriculum. And so I would say overall, like, does the feedback shift the recommendation? It has shifted the recommendation, and that we pulled and adjusted some of the curriculum, and it certainly is going to adjust, if you approve it, how we move forward and how we are really, you know, the things that I think I'm constantly reminded of when we are having hard conversations is that that we really need to move forward in ways where we are moderating our approach, where we're discerning, where we're thoughtful, and we're being respectful of all the values in our community and finding ways to move forward and carrying those values forward. I think next slide, Kels. So this is our recommendation to you, comprehensive health skills. There's a middle school and a high school edition. These would really be kind of like a foundational curriculum for all of the comprehensive health education. And then rights, respects, and responsibility, which is the comprehensive human sexuality curriculum that we're also recommending. You can see there kind of some of the pieces of why. Let's go to the next slide. You can jump through these. There's a bunch of links in that on the 3 R's, and folks, we'd really love that to take a look at those pieces. I know a lot of families have. We really appreciated the rights, that when they talk about the rights and what 3 R's kind of the values of that curriculum, we felt really aligned with state statute, really aligned with this concept of comprehensive human sexuality education. And then I think next slide is where we go from here. So if approved, what happens next is we form this implementation team to develop a scope and sequence, as I said, to be actually quite realistic about what we can do. In terms of education, there's additional components of comprehensive health education that we need to pull out, some additional curriculum. In particular, we had a meeting yesterday on substance use and abuse prevention education resources. We need to flesh that out a little more. We still need to draft guidance. We're working with the special education department and the CLDE department on supports for students. And then, of course, we need to have additional resources for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. And then there's a couple health policies we need to update with you all moving forward. So that's kind of where we are. And I know you have some time for discussion, so I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Chief Cole.
Can I add something really quickly, just to clarify that you all are not being asked to take action on this recommendation tonight? This is for information purposes only. We do intend to come to you at a future board meeting to ask you to take action on it this spring in particular, so that we can plan for implementation in the fall. But today is just information sharing.
Right. So it's ahead of public comment, which are inaction items. This is following the exact same cadence as the math curriculum, where it was introduced in a work session to the board, introduced to the public as a report, and then will come before the board for action within the next month. So to clarify that for public. So we'll now go into board discussion. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments, and we will begin with Director Stepp.
Thank you, Dr. Cole, for that presentation. I think you had answered most of my questions in our working session. I was a little shocked to hear that we didn't have a standardized curriculum and that various people were teaching it, like whoever, stepped up to could do it. So I really appreciate the move towards having something that is standard across the district, and then having training for those teachers who want to step up and do that. So that they have that support. And I'm really thankful that, and a lot of the comments that we heard is that it is not the place of a school district to do this education. I think for every person that said that, there's probably 3 out there that think opposite, that students don't get this at home. And so I think it's really important that we have something like this. And I'm really happy that people can opt out, because if people feel strongly that that is the responsibility of the family or the church, then that's great. That's where they can get that education. But I think a majority of people in the conversation that we all had from your first question on the screen is like, oh, where did you get your education from? And it's varied and it's available everywhere on the internet, which is unfortunate. But so I did have a question about the 1 semester high school health class. So there's other classes that could fulfill that graduation requirement, right? Like a nutrition or there's other health electives, not just this one, right? Or will this be the only one?
That's a great question. I think different schools do it slightly differently. I know that kids will take like CMC classes that'll count, like a nutrition class. I think I don't know that we offer anything other than a standard health class just because of our size and capacity, but I know that there are other pathways to attaining that credit, but I'm happy to defer to you all if I'm misspeaking. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Director Ramirez.
Thank you, Chief Cole, for all your work on this, and to the team. I'm trying to remember the adoption committee who put a lot of thought into creating this. I think for all of us being able to do curriculum for the first time in our experience as board members has been a learning curve. I think we appreciate knowing that we have a team that has been very thorough in their process to gather feedback. So I know that we are always updating those practices and improving on them. And I look forward to us continuing to do that as we move forward with this curriculum. I have a question that I want to ask in regards to a public comment we received. Are we receiving grant money on the side to promote this curriculum to our students?
We received grant money from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for the curricular adoption process. And so what that paid for was stipends for the staff to participate in this because it was after hours, all the meetings. And the if we have additional funding from that, it will go to purchasing the curriculum that you adopt. The 3 Rs is freely available, but the comprehensive life skills is not, or health skills is not. And there is an opportunity for us to potentially go after a similar grant for implementation to help pay for training, teacher training. We talked a little bit about piloting some of the teaching actually happening by through our school-based health center nursing staff and our district nurses. And so there might be an opportunity to get funding to offset the cost of those providers to basically to contract them to do the teaching. So yes, we are getting grant money to do this work, and it's through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
Through the state of Florida.
Correct.
I also just want to clarify, so for this program, for this curriculum adoption, and obviously recognizing your next steps that next will go into what we're actually going to be sharing in the classroom, will you guys be including parent voice in that?
Yeah, I mean, what our anticipation is that we would make a recommended scope and sequence that would say, if we get an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, here are the lessons we would suggest that we teach. And it would be probably another similar set of bubbles of the committee makes the recommendation. We consult with our health and PE content teams, our classroom teachers, our counselors, our staff. We do parent input sessions. We get the kids involved because again, there's a lot of lessons in the curriculum and we just aren't going to be able to do them all. And so, yeah, that would be next year's work is really developing that scope and sequence.
And that would come before the board for approval or not?
I don't think that does in terms of, because I think you adopt the curriculum, but then the particular scope and sequence, I think is really more of an operational component of how we implement the curriculum, but we can certainly provide updates on the process as we go. I mean, I know we'll be working with you on health policies, so it's certainly something we can update you on.
You also mentioned in a information sheet that you shared with us in regards to the gray area for the adopted curriculum. Can you share a little bit about that?
Can you remind me?
Yeah. Basically talking about how much of the curriculum will be targeted.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do not have any expectations, agreements, or commitments preschool through 8th grade on health. It's offered if it works, if the staff have the capacity, if it fits into an academic schedule. Some of the middle schools offer health, not to everybody, not every grade. So we really don't have any real clarity on that. And so this, we're identifying, okay, what is the tool, but then how do we use the tool? How much do we use the tool? Like, we really don't have determinations on that. Now, certainly our health curriculum adoption team that is very committed to the comprehensive health standards has recommendations on what they would love to see covered. There needs to be negotiations. We have a lot of priorities, as you know, for academics and for how we use our school days and school time. And so, and there's also limits in terms of where our teachers' preparedness is. And just size limitations on scale, and that we don't have, somebody that teaches health at every school and that's all they do. So those negotiations are all things we really have to lean into next year. And I think, but it was really hard to do that before we actually knew what we would be doing. So yeah, there's still a lot yet to come. Certainly in schools that are early adopters that have done some more piloting this year, they've explored more of the lessons a little more deeply with staff and kids. And so we are, looking for those early adopters to help also inform this work as we move forward.
And can you talk just a little bit more about that, the training of the teachers who will be using this curriculum? Yeah,
the cool thing is like when you get curriculum that often involves like the publisher doing training for you. And so we're right now, it's, you guys haven't properly adopted it yet, so we can't really pull the trigger on planning training. But we're hoping to use some of that grant money to pay for those trainers to come. Probably what we're going to try to do is hopefully we can get it set up in time for the June Academy, which is an opt-in training. Some of the training, like for the 3 Rs, can be done online asynchronously for teachers, so it can happen that way. We can also do it when school starts. There's a lot of mechanisms for us to do professional development and training. We'll use the grant money to pay people if it's outside of work hours. Yeah, so it'll probably be using multiple strategies to get people access.
And is it just gonna be science teachers, PE and health teachers? Are we opening that option up to others?
Great question. It really depends on the school. So what we've seen is like at the middle schools, it's often science, PE. At the like Glenwood Springs High School has folks who are dedicated health teachers, like 1 or 2 on the PE team. The other high schools, sometimes it's like a lot of those negotiations are happening right now with principals and their staff of who's going to teach health next year. So it could be all kinds of people. We have a PE health content team that meets when content teams meet. It's mostly PE because we do have a more robust PE team at all our schools, but they do work on health issues as well. So it's going to have to be an all call because it's kind of a mixed bag of who ends up teaching health. And like as you saw from our adoption committee, especially K-8, our school counselors do a lot of this work and they're pushing into classrooms to teach it. And so our K-8 counseling team has been really engaged in the work as well. So it's a robust interdisciplinary team that takes responsibility for this.
But they would be opting in.
They'd be opting in.
Thank you.
Director Torres.
Yes, thank you. So as you know, I had submitted a request to see, is this something we could present at a town hall? Can we have a town hall? Can we get more community feedback? And the response was, here's our community engagement. Here's our stakeholder engagement process. There's been all of these opportunities for the community to be involved, for them to share their voice, to be involved in what the curriculum really looks like and give their feedback. And I appreciate that we're not taking action and we're giving the community a chance to give us their feedback. In response to you had mentioned, feedback may often shift the decision-making or what that looks like. I'm curious, because we've been reading through the written comments and I would imagine we'd have a lot of public comments this evening. Has there been discussion about looking at the K through 12 curriculum as being available for perhaps the middle and high school and giving parents access to resources through the K through 5 curriculum? I'm just looking at it also from this lens that a lot of parents think, I want to have these conversations with my kids at home. This is a home topic. This is a family discussion. But those are hard topics to sometimes navigate, and being able to give our parents that want to have these conversations with their kids the resources and age appropriate curriculum. Has there been discussions to say K through 5th, here's resources for parents. If you choose to use it, awesome. This could be something that aligns with when they get to middle school, because the reality is if you don't teach it to them, they're going to find it on social media or YouTube. And in looking at that dynamic, I'm curious if that was a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking really good questions that are also questions that our community has asked of, is this developmentally appropriate? What is, to how far, how much, to what level of detail? And there's a tension, right, with us as schools, like, especially when it comes to like sex education, like we don't want to be the first to talk to kids. Like we would much rather that be a family conversation and then we're providing additional information. We don't want to get out in front of kids and families. And we also really strongly believe that we have an obligation to provide access to important information. And I can tell you the conversations that the team gets to, and when they look at K-5 education, there are concerns about safety, about that we feel like kids need to know language, kids need to know terminology, kids need to know safety, they need to know boundaries, they need to know things that very young children can understand about relationships in their bodies and what is safe and what is not safe. And so those sorts of things are really, when our team talks about K-5, like that bubbles up as this is really important. And we want to do this with families. That's the opt-out process. It's why we like this curriculum, that folks can see what we are wanting to teach as a nudge of like, hey, if you haven't had this conversation, we're offering at school. Can we do it together? But I think so far where our team has landed is the opt-out would protect families that don't want us to be getting in front of them or don't want that conversation to happen first. But I can tell you that, and maybe this is the bias of having nurses and counselors on this team, but their prioritization of student safety and well-being is really strong and very passionate, and hence has led us to say, no, we're talking K-12. Our recommendation is K-12.
Dr. Cole, can I add something really quickly? Also, I think that like our intent and our team's intent when we think about implementation and the opt-out, the benefit to that is if some families want to go further, they have the resource, right? Like it's a free resource and they can do additional lessons at home, have additional conversations at home. If there's families who say, I don't want you having this conversation at all, any of the lessons, you can opt out. If there's sometimes a lesson that a parent might say, actually, I'd rather have that conversation with my kiddo than you, that there's the opportunity for that. I think the idea of the opt-out is to create flexibility across the board, right? That it's not specific of like, I'm anti this content, but maybe I have a preference to do the content myself, or I'm okay with you doing this lesson, but not this one. Or, please do them all. Or I'm going to supplement by doing additional ones at home.
And, one of our kind of big pilot pushes has been our counseling team at GSES. And one of the really interesting things that our counselor at GSES has noticed is that through the opt-out process, it really, she said she keeps going. She kind of started with like a 2-week advance notice and has like backed it up further and further, because what she's finding is that even just the opt-out form and follow-up information and outreach has opened up really what she sees as really valuable communications between parents and the counseling team and the school. And there's been some really interesting conversations that families have had. There's, especially, she said kind of more the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. There's been a couple of families that in conversation with her they've actually let the decision for opting out be a conversation that happens with the child and the family, where the parents are actually talking with the kids. Here's what's coming. Do you want to be part of this or not? And so I think a lot of this is, yes, there is a nudge of like, can we have nudge these conversations to happening? But I think when we've seen, especially in particular in the K-5 and what we've seen at GSES is the more families have access to the curriculum, access to the person teaching it who's trained and, really approaching this thoughtfully and transparently, that it's been pretty, a pretty incredible opportunity for connection and conversation and engagement between the family and the school and the curriculum. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers it all, but.
Thank you. And I have 3 seconds, so I'll wait for my next comment.
Director Tytler.
Thank you for your information, Chief Cole. I have a few questions. The first pertains to the scope and sequence. And if we're talking that of 40 lessons, we might be teaching 5 or something like that. I'm wondering if, without compromising the program, without watering down the curriculum, could we find a way to look at lessons that are more objectionable to certain groups of people and be able to still get at the curriculum and the overall end goal that we're trying to teach without having to teach certain lessons and still get in a place where everybody is feeling good about what is being taught? And by doing that, I think it's also, in a sense, protecting the teachers, because from the teacher point of view, if students are opting out, where are those students going? It's another thing on top of it for the teachers to keep track of, and the communication that's going to take extra time for the teachers there. So I think if we could continue to get that feedback from our constituents who are saying, this is a difficult subject for me, can we still be teaching what we need to teach? Do you think that is possible without maybe touching on these more sensitive issues and still not water down the curriculum and teach what it is that we need to teach?
Great question. And I would say, yes, 100%. When we, and we kind of have moved, we had a meeting to kind of start talking about, I wanted to see where it would go, right? And we said, if you had 2 hours, and we started with K2 with our group of kind of the curriculum adoption team, we said, what would be the top couple lessons you would prioritize if you had 2 hours? I can say that of all the public comments we've heard where folks actually get into like the K2 lessons and say, this one just seemed really inappropriate. None of those lessons were on the top 5 list of our team as saying these are the most important. And so I do believe that as we go into the scope and sequence, especially for folks who have gotten into the curriculum, looked at particular lessons, again, the couple that people have pulled out at 1st and 2nd grade are not even in the top 5 of lessons that our team would say are essential. And so I think that that's also why the scope and sequence work is going to be great. And for the families, I think, as Dr. Rodriguez said, for the families that feel like, oh no, I'm happy to have that lesson with my kid, then it's there. They can access those resources, and there's a lot of tools that families can use. But I do believe that where we land on the scope and sequence, I can just know that the couple that people have called out are not in that top list.
So maybe you'll be able to get back to us once we have that scope and sequence, and we can take those and sort of release as this is our plan, and then we can see if that makes people feel more comfortable.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's the goal, right? The goal would be, hey, this is what we're recommending to schools that they do. If they can give us 2 hours, that they can give us 4 hours, and have people look at it. It's yes, 100%.
And then I know when you had your presentation to us earlier, I had a concern, and I just hope that we have something in the works again for looking at it from the point of view of teachers. Anytime a new curriculum is given, it's extra work for these teachers, it's an extra plan, and just making sure that maybe we're doing some kind of work where some of this grant is we're giving a stipend to some grade level teachers for building out those units and thinking through how that might be taught and what extra things the teachers might need so that they're not having to do that individually, and sort of having it more robust than the regular plan that they're providing through the 3 hours. And is that something that you feel like you can commit to, or that you can put forth for the teachers?
You bet. There's two levels of that we're thinking about in terms of our classroom teachers. One is exactly what you named, their capacity to take on a new curriculum. There's a whole nother set of like their comfort and personal opinions about comprehensive human sexuality. And we've heard from some of those staff saying, I'm a 2nd grade teacher, I'm a 3rd grade teacher. I couldn't do this. Even if this was my own kid, I'd be opting out. So even our teachers, whether or not they even have the capacity, they might not feel comfortable with this content. Even our high school health educators often appreciate having the nurse come in and do the sex education lesson. So I think there's 2 layers to that. I am really believe that we have some really interesting potential with the cooperation of the Mountain Family School-Based Health Center nurse educators and our nursing team, who are trained as health educators. They're deeply passionate about this. They've been part of this work from the get-go. And I'm really interested in looking at what they can do to push in and teach these curricular pieces, at co-teach, be a guest speaker in that classroom. And I've talked to a couple school leaders about this. They love the idea. Frankly, they were kind of like, why can't the nurses teach the health class at my whole high school and do the whole thing? And we have some precedent for that, right? We have outdoor ed programs at our high schools because we contract with the buddy program, not because we have outdoor ed teachers hired. So I think out of a sensitivity to exactly what you're naming, and also being realistic about where our priorities are as a district are, we're very cautious in asking our gen ed teachers to do this right now, which is really why the way we're going to be approaching this next year is an opt-in, is here's some tools. We're going to provide you training. Yes, we can stipend you to get that training if you can be an early adopter. If not, and you're willing to create some space, we'll have some people that are trained and can come do it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cole, for all the work on this and to the whole adoption committee. I just have a couple of questions. You've touched on a lot of them. I too appreciate the process that you all have gone through with engaging community, engaging teachers, engaging educators that would be involved in this moving forward. And just engaging with us in this way on curriculum, because again, this is a new process. Our policy was just updated in January of 2023 on curricular adoption. And we're being intentional about doing this in public meetings and adopting curriculum as a board. So thank you for that. You've talked a little bit about the way that opt-outs work now, and that's obviously one of the hot topics in this area. Can you describe a little bit more about the way that opt-outs are working currently and how shifting to a standardized model would look?
Yep, you bet. What I know is that our current opt-outs are sometimes inconsistent, sometimes forgotten. When I have been consulted, especially this year, on like, hey, we're planning this, especially at the high schools, we're planning a curriculum in partnership with Mountain Family on sex education. We know we need to do an opt-out. Can you help me? Like, what's our timeline? What's our recommendation is 1 to 2 weeks right now. We don't have a standard template, but usually what we're following is state statute that says there's legal requirements. And also we have a very outdated health policy that has some description of what the opt-out has to look like. So we're using those for guidance, where what we're including in the opt-out is here's the curriculum that's going to happen. Here's how you can look at it and review it. If it's a link, if it's more of like, or sometimes it's if you'd like to review the curriculum, let us know and we can get you a copy. If you'd like to opt out, sign this document, send us a message, and we'll opt in. Your kid can opt out. Every school does it a little differently in terms of like opting out means going where, doing what. So they all manage that a little differently. And we had some interesting questions about like, are kids ostracized for not showing up for that class? I think it's a great question. I haven't heard of that yet, of kids feeling isolated or ostracized for that. My sense is that because of the fluidity of our schools and kids being pulled out for this and pulled out for that, and that they're not necessarily paying that much attention to where kids are going when they're opting out. So that's what I know about how we're doing it. With some of the pilot work at GSES, as I told you, the counselor has kind of started with a 2-week advance, and she's gone back and back because it's just opened up a lot of really interesting conversations. She wants to have more time for that with families. I think one of the opt-out takeaways that has come up is also this interesting piece around, can the opt-out letter come followed by a school-based parent meeting that is all in advance of the actual curriculum? And I don't know our capacity, depending on when the 3rd grade's doing it and 6th grade's doing it. I think of Riverview, and like, that's a lot of grades. But is there a way that we could do more? Could you have more of the scope and sequence? Here's what we're doing all year. We're going to tell you now, and we'll tell you again 3 weeks before it actually happens. And doing more parent Q&As that are school-based, that are specific to that curriculum, that provide more resources. So we've looked at a couple of things when it comes to trying to standardize the practices and what's possible. But it is beyond what the state statute says and the requirement to have an opt-out, beyond our own policy. It's kind of, everybody does it a little differently.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is specifically about the scope and sequence and the timeline. So I've gathered that next year would be a pilot year. You'd be piloting it in various schools at various levels, but it really would still be a time where you're determining the scope, the sequence with the team, of how it would be rolled out district-wide. Do you have any idea on, what the goal is for district-wide rollout, or what is the intent at this point? If you had to give us a timeline.
You bet. As I mentioned, we don't have commitments, agreements, expectations around what is done. And I think because we haven't seen it happen. And so, our team is about 2/3 of the way through a scope and sequence. And it's, kind of color coded in terms of we get 60 minutes. What are we going to do? We get 2 hours. What are we going to do? We get maybe 4 hours, I think was the max that we thought we might be able to negotiate. what we're hoping is that next year would be a year to actually get into schools, do this. I think for a lot of our teachers to get that feedback, our administrators, they kind of need to see it happening. They kind of need to use it to be able to give us feedback of that was great, or that's not super helpful, or that lesson didn't resonate. And so we're hoping to be able to pilot next year, this recommended scope and sequence, and then continue to engage, like, are these the right lessons? Do these feel right to our community, to our kids, our families, our staff? And then ideally maybe come to a place where we can say, could we come to agreements to say, we're going to try to do an hour a year. We're going to try to do a couple hours a year. There's a lot of competition for time. Because I'm going to probably do the same stinking process on substance use and try to push it and get time on, drug prevention education as well. And it's going to be tricky. I don't think, So that's kind of how we're thinking about next year being an opportunity for folks to get to engage by us bringing it to them.
That's helpful. So we'll now move to 5 minutes of open board discussion.
I think we keep talking about this too, but I just wanted to make it clear. I mean, if you read through our written comments and feedback that we've gotten from different community members who are saying, wait a minute, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't feel involved. I felt like, the board didn't share this with us before this meeting. And I really think it's important to point out the number of communications that went out, the community engagement that took place. Can you speak to maybe, and I don't know if we can ask questions in this, but speak to the level of participation? Because again, the numbers of people who said, this board's not being transparent, they're making decisions without us, when there were multiple opportunities to give feedback. And you got some people that weren't happy about it. I mean, it wasn't just feedback from those that were in support, but maybe speak to the volume of participation that you received.
You bet. For the staff meetings, it was pretty quiet. Maybe had 1 or 2 staff members drop in and ask questions. I think most of the staff who were interested got involved on the curriculum committee or kind of reached out to me over the course of the years. I care. I want to know what happens, but I can't join the committee. So staff was pretty quiet. And I think part of it has to do with it's like not quite anybody's responsibility. And so it's kind of tricky. The parent info session in person, we had 2 parents show up. We had a great conversation that both parents had a lot of concerns and were pretty opposed to the curriculum. But we spent a long time talking about it and listening to talking about the pieces that made them uncomfortable, that felt misaligned. And that definitely informed how we kept thinking and moving forward. The Google survey that went out with the notifications, I think got 30 to 40 comments from parents. And they were a little bit all over the board, heavier on the support side, especially around inclusion. And I think one of the interesting things is, right, there's always the sample size of like, how long do you keep doing community feedback? We're asking this question with the portrait of a graduate, like, do we keep going when we keep seeing, when the concerns are the same? And so I would say that not much of like what we've gotten tonight is distinctly different than what we heard through the Google surveys. I think the concerns are pretty similar. So far, like it's not been a ton of new feedback. But it certainly was limited in terms of, we're always looking at family engagement and how do we connect with folks. It's tricky. I know we talk a lot about communication and how do we engage families. We deliberately, we knew that there's certain populations of our families that don't always respond, especially our Spanish speaking families, to things that are in the newsletter. And so we did consult with the FRC because they work with so many Spanish speaking families with the curriculum adoption process. So we did a focus group with all the family liaisons on the curricular adoption process and really heard from that team's concerns, especially around parent resources and access. And I think it was one of their feedback really informed, I think also what we loved about the 3 R's and the accessibility of Spanish resources was really helpful. So no, I would say when folks feel like they might have missed it, yeah, we've hoped for more turnout for sure. But will we keep talking about it? Absolutely.
I guess I would just add, and obviously this was one of my concerns from the get-go of being able to opt out from this program. I think, especially with the fact that we don't have alignment right now in our district throughout all of our schools, I think this is a good tool for us and a good place for us to continue to bring alignment across the district. I think health is a really important conversation that is being had really at this point without the knowledge or the approval of the board. And so, I think that this at least opens the door for the implementation team that, obviously, like you mentioned, will have parent voice to be able to bring forward some of these lessons that will be shared to families before they are presented as lessons to our students. And so I think more than anything, I again appreciate the opportunity to opt out of curriculum. Even though it is state mandated, I think it's important for us to have as parents enough time to know what is being brought forward to our students and the opportunity to decide if we want to have our child engage with it or not.
Just really quickly, one more thing, and I know we're
out of time, Director Tytler, but go for it. Yeah.
is just making sure that we look at the feasibility of having like nurses come in and teach. I think it sounds great in theory, but when you're multiplying times 4 or 5 class sections times 4 or 5 grade levels, I don't think it's something that's gonna perhaps really roll that way. And so we need to look broader than that, I believe.
Thank you, Chief Cole. The next business in order is our second superintendent update, which is a presentation from Chief Markham on the 23-24 budget forecast. And then we will jump into public comment.
All right. So tonight's presentation and discussion focuses on general fund revenue for the upcoming fiscal year 24. This will be the first of probably presentations at all remaining board meetings covering and building up to approval of next year's budget. So first, a couple comments to start off. There's lots of moving pieces this year. UPK is coming into effect. That's a whole separate State Department. The pupils from our preschool programs are no longer counted in our funding formula. They're elsewhere. So that's a change. And then lots of changing or debates about changing the state funding formula at the Colorado legislature. They talked about changing the cost of living factor, reducing that by 3%, spreading those funds around through different other funding factors. But at the end of the day, with no new money, it's just a shell game, and you create losers and winners, and there is ultimately no momentum to make permanent change. So the outcome for us is currently positive next year, driven primarily by inflation. Amendment 23 dictates that the base per pupil amount goes up by inflation, which is currently about 8% in their formula, and then a buy down of the BS factor. All adds up to more money for school districts across Colorado, including ours. So to start, what is the general fund? First off, governmental accounting. A fund is a collection of accounts. You use it to maintain control over certain resources. Specifically, the general fund is our primary operating fund. It's where we pay for most of our ongoing operations and activities. The current budget for next year estimates revenue of $91 million. That's just over $16,000 per pupil. That's before transfers to other funds and allocations to district charters, CCS and TRCS. You can see how it compares to prior years. So a quick summary of what we're going to talk about tonight. 62 million coming in from Total program funding, which is the largest source, you can see we'll collect local, state, and federal revenues. That $90.9 million that was cited on the previous slide. Transfer to other funds, that's we send money to the capital project funds to maintain our buildings and property. We send money to the charter schools per our contracts with them. We pay for insurance, those sorts of things. Gives us net revenue in the general fund of $78.6 million. Our estimated funded pupil count, 5,129. See, the net revenue is a little bit lower because we have made transfers on this slide as compared to the prior. So where does all that money come from? There's multiple sources, local, state, and federal. You can see our largest source of money is from local property taxes. It makes up about 67% of the general fund revenue. State sources make up an additional 31%, and federal is a small slice of the general fund, under 2%. We do collect additional federal revenues in the designated purpose fund. That'd be Title I, Title II, Title III, those sorts of grants. So we'll talk a little bit about total program funding and how it works. At its base is per pupil amount times the total funded pupils. That's dictated by the School Finance Act, which the Colorado legislature passes every spring. It's currently being debated. It is SB 23-287. It's in process in the legislature currently. Per that, the estimate we got from CDE dictates $11,002 per pupil for our district, which is a healthy increase over the prior year. So how does that formula work? So a base amount is set, each district gets that base amount, and then different factors are applied to it. So you have a cost of living factor for us. We're the second highest cost of living in the state, behind only Aspen. There's a personnel cost factor. So you apply cost of living only to your personnel costs. Smaller districts get more money for loss of economies of scale. At-risk students, ELL students, and then the budget stabilization factor acts as a negative. It used to be called the negative factor that takes money out of the formula. They have been steadily buying that down over the last 3 years. So last year was $382 per pupil was taken away from the district. Next year, we're forecasting $213. So that's a big improvement for us. You put it all together, and what does it look like? You have $8,076 as a base that every school district in Colorado receives. You can see how each piece adds up. Cost of living being the biggest for us. So when I mentioned earlier, they were talking about cutting that affects us much more than somebody with a lower cost of living. And then you can see the BS factor removing $213. You get to our total per pupil revenue of $11,002. Table to compare year over year. You can see bottom line over $1,000 or 10% increase in our per pupil funding. The second part of that formula is funded pupil count. It starts with enrollment. So every October 1st, every district counts kids, takes the official enrollment. But it's not as simple as that for districts such as ours that have had a decline in enrollment. They'll take the larger of either the current year or the 2, 3, 4, or 5 year average. It's basically if you've lost students, it allows you to ease into a that lower funding scenario without having major cuts right away. That can be a real shock to the school system. Currently, RFSD is benefiting by 8 pupils. When I look at it, I think this is probably our last year of 5 year averaging. We'll have rolled off all our high enrollment years to kind of be in the new normal. So you can see our enrollment for the last 5 years. Like I said, we're in the 5 year averaging. So the 5 year average is 5,659. Prior to this year, you would have added preschool counts and your early childhood special education counts to that as well, but those are being funded elsewhere now through a new state agency. 530 of those students are enrolled at our charter schools, and the district will pass through $5.8 million of total program funds to CCS and TRCS. For people who want more detail, there's some detail here. Kind of goes through what the formula looks like. This is a snapshot of this spreadsheet that's comes primarily from CDE. But you kind of sees how each part of the formula works to get to the bottom line of the $62.2 million of total program funding. So we've talked about total program funding, the largest source of funding for the district. In addition to that, we receive funding from local sources. Primarily, I think the one everyone's familiar with from the 2021 election campaign was our mill levy overrides. In addition to that, we collect EC tuition, specific ownership taxes, are taxes on car registrations, interest on invested cash, which used to be nothing, and now with interest rates having risen over the last year, that's a meaningful amount of money. Like I mentioned, the largest source of local funds outside of total program funding are mill levy overrides. They must be voted on and approved by local district voters. The maximum allowed is 25% of that total program funding we showed before. We're currently at that maximum allowed per law. Last year, that was $2,805 per pupil. We're forecasting $2,924 per pupil. So an increase due to property values going up and the value of our total program going up. So next, we'll move on to state funding. The district receives money outside of total program usually for specific student populations and programs. Excluding universal pre-K, it's $689 per pupil. The reason I excluded universal pre-K from that is because that's based on preschool enrollment, and preschool enrollment's not counted in our K-12 enrollment. So it felt a little apples to oranges there. READ Act provides structured resources to get students reading at grade level by 4th grade. They provide transportation reimbursement funds, special education funds through ECEA, and then English Language Proficiency Act funds to help support our English language learners. One call out in the current School Finance Act are additional rural schools funds. So they're setting aside $30 million currently next year for rural schools, which Warren Fort qualifies. We're looking at $163 per pupil, just under $1 million, 922,000. That's a decrease. They had one-time fundings through Prop EE that sunset this year. It was a little bit higher, but we're happy to see that back supporting rural districts. And then federal funding. I know there's always a lot of talk about what the federal funding can do for us, but at the end of the day, for our general fund, it's 1.7%. The primary form of that is through IDEA, which supports special education funding and expenses in our district, as well as the Medicaid reimbursements we receive, which supports our family liaison positions. So this was shown earlier. Again, it's the summary of the revenue estimate. You can see the different pieces, the large buckets. Questions and discussions?
Thank you, Chief Markham. We'll now have 2 minutes for each board member to ask questions. We'll start with Director Ramirez.
Thank you, Chief Markham. I did have a question. Are we participating in the free lunch program that the state of Colorado has?
Yeah, it's our intention. I've talked to Director Mays that we will participate in that. We're still kind of waiting for how we actually formally participate in that program.
Do we expect to get some revenue additional for that?
That would be in the food service fund, which is separate from the general fund, which we looked at tonight.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
Director Torres.
Yeah, I have a question about the funded pupil count on slide number 10. It does show the funded pupil count at the top of 5908. And the number on slide number 11. On 11 at the top, pupil count of 5908. And then on slide 10, it equals 5129, which is also on that final slide. So where is that 5908 count coming from?
So the way enrollment starts with all students in our district, including charters and charters authorized not by the district. So that would include Ross Montessori at that top line. So Ross Montessori also will receive $11,002 people. It's just taken out. You can see on that slide 11, maybe a third of the way up, it says less CSI share. So
Mhm.
that's the Colorado, that's Charter School Institute. So that's the Ross share. So they do everybody together, then they gradually back out all the different pieces. So it can be a little confusing. Yeah,
Okay, because the 530 came from the two charter schools
and then Ross has 250.
and then
So,
two
yeah.
from Ross. Okay.
So
I was trying to figure out where that number.
yeah, and I show it
different.
this way because if you do, CD is very transparent. They provide the actual formula for you to go look at. So I wanted to make sure that there was numbers to tie from top to bottom, what we show to what CDE is showing. I tend to talk about what's net to our district, even excluding CCS and TRCS, because they control that money. They have their own processes for allocating that money, but I think it is important to show kind of top to bottom how the money flows throughout the state and into our district.
Okay. And then I was adding up the per pupil allocation for the, 11,002 plus the 120 from the mill levy, plus the, the 338 from the SPED. And then I couldn't quite come up with that 15 in all those. So do you have?
I can get that for you. It's again, so everything above the transfers is going to be charter schools included in most of those. They participate in a lot of that funding. And below the line is all net to us. Again, it's kind of what is your denominator, what student count are you dividing by? So I'll see if I can pull together a summary and present that at another meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Tyler.
I had the same question as Director Torres, but I'm going to ask one more follow-up to see if I understand it correctly. Chief Markham, on slide 11, where it says 5908, did you say it was 250 at Ross, and that's what puts us down to that 5659?
Yeah, that should be correct. Or
And-
or maybe it's 280. I think I took the
Okay.
average of the last 2 years. Yeah.
Then my question is, after you take away the 500, so when you take away the 530, that's what puts us down. And that last slide where it says that we have 5,129
Yeah.
as our total. Why is that? And it seems like that count from another slide that was on one of the other pieces of information that you sent to us is maybe 200 less than it was in years past. Is that because of the preschool being taken out? Is that why there's that like 200 discrepancy, or are we losing from a certain area?
No, it's because of the loss of the preschool count no longer being funded through here. It's being funded through the Department of Early Childhood Education, which is new at the state.
Perfect. Thank you.
And you'll see a line item also on the agenda tonight. There's a link to an actual financial statement, or revenue statement. You'll see anticipated universal pre-K revenue, and that's kind of the shift. So it's coming out of one bucket into another.
Thank you.
Director Stepp.
Thank you, Chief Markham. I know with the property tax, you kind of have to make some assumptions with that as well. And the assessments are only done every other year. So is this a year that it's happening, or?
Yeah, this will be a big reassessment year. Last year was pretty flat. I think overall, we have 3 counties, which makes it a little more complex. But overall for our district, we were basically flat on our assessed value. This year, depending on who you talk to, it could be really big. I know there's some proposed legislation. I haven't followed up on that in a while that may cap some of those increases. But CDE is projecting a 25 to 30% increase in our property tax values next year. So I've tried to match that where possible. But yeah, that's
So that estimate they have on here is based on what the CDE was looking at.
yeah, and that will affect MLO a little bit. But again, we're maxed out on MLO, like we're artificially capping ourselves. I don't think that's a risk. And within total program funding, you get the whole amount. Whatever the local doesn't fund, the state makes up the rest. So again, I think the risk there is low if we were to under or overestimate that.
I know you don't have any control of this. This comes from the state legislature, but I guess this is more of a question for you, is how, do we have any influence? I'm just looking at our at-risk students and our ELL funding. It seems like if our ELL students are continuing to increase, yeah, we did get $16 more per student, but how do we lobby for that or advocate to to change that, or can we?
I think it's always important to reach out to our local reps, both reps and senators. We lost a powerful voice.
So we're,
And Senator Rankin, but I think that's the place to start advocating through CASBO. I can't keep all the CASBs. Continue to advocate through there. But again, right now, where they're trying to find that money is cost of living, right? So they're going to cut cost of living. And when they were doing that, we're actually coming out losers because our cost of living is so high. So that's a tough one. Without actually more money coming in, it's a tough nut to crack. And I will say, we spend more than that on both special ed and ELL.
it's just to
the funding side.
subsidize it.
Yeah.
And I have been playing phone tag with our new rep, Varela, and that's an opportunity just to connect on what our priorities are as a district, what's important for us, and looking forward to that conversation. But we've left each other a couple of voicemails.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the other, the rural funding for school districts has gone down a little bit. It's like, they say it's a priority, but then they don't give any money towards it.
Right. So probably when it started, it was 25 million, and then it went to 30, and it went to 35. This year, they funded it again by, instead of buying down the BS factor by 180, they bought it down by 50 and put that other 30 million into rural schools. They keep saying that's one time, and that's how we treat it. We don't treat it as recurring funds, because one of these days there won't be the support there for it. And so we're, it makes it a bit of a challenge to put $1 million in a budget that can't go towards recurring ongoing needs.
I guess another thing to add, we work really closely with our school finance project, as well as we're a member of the Rural Alliance. And via with both of those, both from those organizations advocate model.
I have 7 more seconds. So I'm looking at our revenues for next year in the process of, what you did with IBB and salaries and stuff. Can you estimate or let us know like what kind of cost of living increase, or what are we putting into salaries from the mill levy dollars?
So typically an increase in the per pupil amount goes towards current staff size, because a lot of that is driven by inflation. So we're trying to match or beat inflation to give true raises. That being said, insurance is up 16%. Utilities are up 20%. I mean, everything else is going to take away from that as well. So our goal would be to match or beat inflation. And I think inflation, the formula is 8%. It tends to lag a little bit. Last year was 3%, and we were seeing double-digit inflation from the get-go. So it tends to lag some.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Markham, for all your work on this and for your presentation. I don't have any further follow-up questions that I think need to be addressed here. So we'll move into 5 minutes of open discussion if anyone else has anything further.
I guess just a final thought, based on all your numbers and your projections, you're feeling pretty good about the budget for next year.
Yeah, feeling pretty comfortable.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Chief Markham.
Welcome.
At this time, we will welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There are 14 speakers signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes for public speaking. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask you to be thoughtful and constructive with your comments. And thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 28 written comments. Our first speaker is Alex Sanchez.
Hello, my name is Alex Sanchez. I'm a graduate of the school district. I'm a voter in the district. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I also run an advocacy organization, Voces Unidas de las Montañas. We're based in Glenwood Springs. We organize Latinos around education justice issues. Sorry I could not be there in person again, I'm actually in Denver lobbying for legislation that actually families from the Roaring Fork School District are helping to champion to improve the water quality in many of our mobile home park communities up and down the Roaring Fork Valley. I recently wrote an op-ed in the Aspen Times about the school district. So I thought I would share some of the main points during public comment in case you all missed it. Just as I started that piece, I want to also start my comments today by expressing how concerning it was to read the last paragraph of the board's letter to the community about our superintendent's evaluation. It is never okay to use hateful and racist language masked as feedback or opinions or grievances or personal vendettas. We should not tolerate hate and we must do better as a community. Superintendent Rodriguez and other employees or board members of color should be able to trust the district employees and the community won't substitute racism and hate for a fair evaluation of their abilities. As far as I can tell, and I've been following this school system for at least 4 different administrations, Dr. Rodriguez is probably the only superintendent in recent history to invite the public feedback in his public performance evaluation. Next, in the op-ed, I try to remind our neighbors that we should not let distractions keep us from being focused on what's important. Those distractions, whether they be internal personal disputes, irrelevant contract clauses, or exploratory housing assistance programs, it should not sidetrack us as a community from the larger mission. To be clear, the focus of the entire community should be the students and what they need to close an unacceptable achievement gap that has been ignored for far too long in this school system. I don't know who still needs to hear this, but nearly 6 out of 10 students in the district are Latino, a majority of whom primarily speak Spanish, and Latino students are, on average, academically 2.8 grades behind their white peers. Based on your own assessment, as a school district, Latinos still face an achievement gap as high as 40%. I did give the district kudos for developing the new learning acceleration plan that identifies some of the root causes of the disparities. We hope that the board supports it and approves the funding needed to implement it, but we still have questions. Like how long will it take to eradicate the 40% gap under this plan? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 100 years? And is that acceptable for today's parents and students? Or what else is needed? Lastly, I reference in the op-ed that the district could use a comprehensive plan to invigorate robust community engagement, not just among Latinos, but all parents, all teachers, all administrators, the broader community. This will help with the misdirected outrage every time a particular decision or idea doesn't sit well with certain people. Some groups are used to being the only ones.
Alex, you hit your 3-minute limit. Can you please wrap up your remarks?
Thank you for what you do, and we'll see you next board meeting.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alan Munoz Valenciano.
Hello, members of the board. Good evening. My name is Alan Munoz Valenciano. I'm currently working as the regional manager for Voces Unidas de las Montañas. And today I'm here to follow up on the work that we as a district and a community need to do to ensure the safety and success of our students. At the previous board meeting on April 12th, you all heard directly from students, and I hope that the message is clear. It is not okay for federal immigration enforcement agencies to be invited and present in our schools. And that is your responsibility as a school district to begin the repair, to begin to repair the damage that has been done. However, the incident revolving Border Patrol being present at Glenwood High School is not an isolated incident. It's part of the continuous disregard, indifference, and dismissal of Latino and Latina students in the Roaring Fork School District. Almost 60% of students in Roaring Fork School District are Latino, and it is your job to create policies that will ensure that students feel safe, welcomed, and seen in their schools. We cannot wait for another incident to happen before you choose to act on this issue. Real damage was caused, and we cannot stray away from what the real issue is. The needs of Latino and Latina students are being cast aside. And we are seeing the results of this every day in the district. The lack of awareness or lack of intention to address the needs of Latino students leads to a gap in achievement, a decrease in student safety, and sense of belonging, and a distrust of the community. And today I'm here to continue demanding we take the first of many steps to ensure that students feel safe and welcomed in their school. They are as follows: codify the principles from the Safe Haven Resolution and further clarify that the district will not invite any federal immigration enforcement agency to any campus unless compelled by court order. Provide additional policies and regulations to hold schools and third-party organizations partnering with the school district accountable for violations of the Safe Haven provisions. Provide additional training to all staff on existing and new policies, regulations, resolutions, protocols, and public commitments related to being a safe haven school district. And lastly, create and convene an ad hoc advisory committee to the superintendent made up of impacted residents or impacted students, parents, and community members to advise the superintendent and the district on any additional steps needed to reassure the community that incidents like this one will never happen. We want to work with you and build off the things that are currently being done, but we want to make sure that they're being done right and that we're raising the floor for all the students. We need you all to take action and to make sure that demands are met and that the issues are being addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephanie Hirsch.
Hi, everyone. I am a mom in the Valley. I do not have a child in RFSD, but I run the Roaring Fork Moms Group, which has close to 2,000 women. So a lot of the women have asked me to come and express some concern today. I have an 8-year-old boy. I'll mention him in a minute. So as administrator of the Roaring Fork Moms Group, I've learned that we have a really big problem in the Valley, huge problem with test scores and parents complaining about education, particularly in this school district. And we also have another problem, which is uncomfortable to talk about, and that's sexual assault. I've done a lot of work with Riverbridge Regional Center in Glenwood Springs. As many of us know, they're flooded with kids who are victims of sexual assault. In 2018, I learned of a handful of kids in this valley who were assaulted in the bathroom of a private school in the area down the street. One of the children has struggled with mental health and gender dysphoria following the incident. Severe struggles, multiple suicide attempts. Another had parents caught her trying to commit suicide last year. Another molested in kindergarten in the bathroom at the school was then assaulted, who then assaulted a child in diapers and faced years in a rehabilitation facility. And I also have questions about the recent suicide at the Basalt High School that I want to address right now. So I believe the curriculum that a lot of parents want to talk about today is actually opening up the door for kids to prematurely explore one another's bodies. But I also feel concerned that we're opening up the door to assault, such as what happened in the bathroom of the school. I don't know if I am allowed to mention. So my mother taught me as a kid that adults who talk about sex or private parts in front of children were dangerous, and they are, and they were. My best childhood friend committed suicide after being assaulted by one of our friend's brothers. And that's what brings me here today. I feel concerned for the kids in our RFSD. To my understanding, the new curriculum will start children discussing things like vulva and the clitoris as soon as kindergarten, including language indicating what the sensitive part of a girl's body is. I have an 8-year-old boy, and if I sit down with him and tell him that his friend has a sensitive part on their body, he might want to know what that is. It's going to be intriguing. And what concerns me is that now these little girls have targets on their bodies. What's more aggressive children may consider this not just as a green light, but they may consider it as permission from the school to explore and even assault one another. This has happened in our valley.
Please wrap up your comments.
So in summary, I implore the board to proceed with caution. Our duty is to protect the kids. It's not okay for kids to talk about sex with adults. It opens up a door and it's dangerous. And I would like us to err on the side of caution.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kath Adams. Chief Bean, do you want to take the item so that, okay.
Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you. You mind if I stand?
Not at all.
Okay, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be here. I appreciate it. Some of you know me. I'm an advocate for Valley for fentanyl awareness.
Could you stand close to the microphone so the people online can hear you? Thank you.
Sure. I'm an advocate for fentanyl awareness. I'm excited because on Friday, we're going to be celebrating my daughter Ashley's birthday. She's going to be 19. She's going to be finishing her freshman year of college, Hope College in Michigan. And it's going to be a great day for her, 19 years old. Also on Friday, April 28th, we're going to be celebrating the 30-year anniversary of my daughter's journey to heaven. She passed on my other daughter's birthday. She took a pill that she thought was a Percocet from someone whom she trusted, and it was pure fentanyl. And we have marched hard in our valley because lives matter. I would like to ask and kindly ask, and if you can see my passion, feel my passion, this is not curriculum, but this is Fentanyl Awareness Day is May 9th. Some of you know also Fentanyl Awareness Day is in April. We've hosted a couple events. We've hosted for the past 2 years events. I would like to ask for your consideration to open a Fentanyl Awareness Day where we can collaborate together, myself, Aperture of Hope, and the school district, where we can bring this fentanyl awareness to our schools. I have talked to the Aspen School high schoolers. I have talked to the Basalt School. I have talked to Roaring Fork. I just finished up a 6-week project with Gwen Jones at Roaring Fork High School where we did photography awareness. Kids that weren't showing up to a class were all of a sudden showing up. I have given out 400 stickers to the kids at Two Rivers Community School. I walked into every learning center. People ask me, how do you talk to young kids about fentanyl? Well, I think I dropped it on the ground. You let them know that they have a 16-year-old young that has to do this picture. And then we passed, there were 5 white cards in her wallet that said, "You matter. What do we do with this?" When I walk into those classrooms with those young kids, all I do is go in there and I let them know that they are a gift to our world. They are beautiful. They are the hope of our future. And I love them very much. When I talk to sorry, I'm looking at the clock, the 7th and the 8th graders, I share my story, but I share it of hope. Finding hope and meaning out of the worst thing that can ever happen in your life. My talks are inspirational, they're talks of hope. In this bag, can I show everybody? Hearts. These are hearts, kids in our schools that I have spoken to. And there's more cards. And there's more. I have over 2,000 cards in the backpack that Emily carried in elementary. And I will leave you, and I'm over time. It's important. One of the cards says, I really relate to the connection of the story past shared and choice of words. Cause of living, not the cause of death. That's truly beautiful. I personally was sexually abused, among other things. While it is a harsh and painful reality, sense of hope. I can connect and help with this experience. This is the first fact I've ever been invested in. So Kat and Emily and Ashley have given me hope.
Thank you.
Having that day, and I am here many steps to help organize that day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Taylor.
I want to say thank you to Kath. Thank you, Kath. That was an inspiring talk. Thank you. So, I actually wanted, I was going to start by saying that I think we should wait to vote on this thing, the 3 R's K-12 sexuality and health curriculum, but I'm pleased that you all have decided to hold off on that for a month. And I'm asking also that I hope that there might be at least 2, hopefully at least 1 town hall meeting that we could all attend, and we could have a question and answer and some kind of a dialogue that would be very helpful. So I think to come to some kind of a baseline idea of what we can all agree on. And then maybe I appreciate the opt out. I really think that's important. And maybe, even have an opt in of something, so if somebody wants to do something in addition, I just want to also say that, that the board members and Anna Cole that stated the info and the material has been available to all of us since last fall. And I can attest to there being that one meeting that was canceled at the last minute. And then the written material that was available was very difficult to access. You have to click through, click and click and click and click to find all the information. There's so much of it that it was, tough to get through. And it was overwhelming amount of information and materials actually, but I think it's all so important that I want to be able to read it carefully. Apparently another meeting to share the information was announced on February 28th. And I've spoken with several people, and I know that must have been announced and everything, but I didn't hear about it. And a lot of people I've spoken with didn't know about it. So that's too bad. And the deadline to comment on the curriculum was this past Monday, but I'm hoping that can be, since you guys are not going to vote on it tonight, that maybe we could extend that and have more discussion about that. I've also heard from many parents and teachers that are uncomfortable to downright horrified by the content of the curriculum, stating that it is not only age inappropriate, but in many instances, it amounts to basically sexualization of our kids. And it goes too far in some instances. It's beginning in kindergarten when they're too young anyway, and continuing to high school. So a month ago, the school board promised us that they would do better and communicate better and be more transparent. And so I would hope that, going forward, we can have a better show of that and by having more town hall meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Kalin.
Hello, thank you, board. My name's Joe Kalin. I'm here mostly thanks to my wife, who we have a baby coming in 3 weeks, and a very sick 17-month-old and very needy back at home. So hopefully the online option can be made available to other participants as well. I'd also like to start off by thanking both Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Cole have always been very responsive to my emails, and they should be commended for that, especially when I disagree with them. They're still very responsive, and that's something I admire about this school district. Look, I desperately wish I was here to talk about educational attainment and the gap that we have in our schools. I've been doing a ton of research ever since I was spurred to action based off of the speakers at the last board meeting. And I thank all of the speakers for bringing that up. I wasn't realize how bad it was, and that's my fault. But unfortunately, I'm here instead to talk about the curriculum committee. We've heard some powerful testimony already, predominantly focused on the content of their recommendations. I'm more concerned about the process. We're deeply troubled about the lack of transparency in the health committee adoption process. Deeply troubled, regardless of comments that have been made here. I think it speaks for itself when you have a meeting where only 2 people show up, that maybe we may have missed the boat there on the communication and the transparency. It's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just that when we compare something that is so sensitive to, oh, it's the same feedback process we use for the math curriculum, that speaks to maybe there was a little bit of a mess. Though, I don't know, the math curriculum could have been very confrontational as well. I sincerely don't know that. Look, the single meeting, what amounted to basically a document dump. You've heard from other speakers, the need to click back and forth. I legitimately felt like I was a US congressperson trying to review a budget request in 48 hours, trying to dig through everything. And thus my comments are scattered all across the map right now. A simple question: does the board and the committee honestly feel that this was a transparent and effective process to date? If not, I urge the board, to go back to the committee with instructions to gather further public input. If we do feel like the process was effective, then there's clearly a disconnect between how the committee and the public feels. And you've heard that not only from me, but from other speakers as well. I'd also like to point out about the actual curriculum. It comes from a far left-wing political advocacy organization that posts about defunding the police, abortion without restrictions. Like, surely we can find an inclusive curriculum that isn't developed by a political advocacy organization. We're trying to keep politics out of this, and I commend all of the speakers. We haven't heard anything about not wanting an inclusive curriculum here. So I sincerely hope at the next board meeting, we can have a discussion on educational attainment. I know it's a passion for leadership here, and it's now a passion for me as well, and that we can just bring down the temperature. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maureen Bierman.
Hi, thank you to the board. Thank you for Dr. Cole for all of the work that you presented on earlier tonight. It was really informative and helpful to hear. I'm the parent of one 8-year-old current student in the Roaring Fork School District. She's back there, super bored right now, but holding up, and a 4-year-old who will someday be a Roaring Fork School District student. I'm here to, I'm also, I should say, a little bit of an expert on sex, gender, and sexuality. I've taught it, I've written on it, I have researched it, but I'm speaking here tonight really as a parent. And a lot of the comments that I've read written online and things that we've heard tonight too express concern about maybe how our focus should be on academics, or our focus should be on other things. There's no place in school for this kind of education. But I want to make an argument for you guys tonight that this is exactly what we need in order to support our students academically and to support their general wellness. There's been a lot of research that's been done on sexual education curriculums and what works and what doesn't work and what age group it works on. And recently, a really, really informative 30-year study was done that looked at all of the research on sexual education curriculums over a 30-year period. And it found some really interesting things. It found that comprehensive sex education can actually prevent child sex abuse through improved self-protection skills. It empowers kids to understand their bodies, to understand, have improved knowledge of appropriate and inappropriate touching, increased parent-child communication, and increased disclosure of abuse. So like the sexual assaults that Stephanie was discussing, I share her concerns. I would never want to hear about that happening in our schools, but this curriculum actually can help prevent that. And that is evidence that's supported by evidence. We know that science tells us that. It can prevent intimate partner violence. It teaches students, kids to have increased appreciation for sexual diversity, and it improves environments for our LGBTQ students. This is really important. As we know, there's a lot of excessive suicide attempts, for example, under LGBTQ population. This shows a decrease in that for those students. Inclusive sex education, such as the one that Anna presented today, results in better mental health among LGBTQ students, including lowered reports of suicidal thoughts, as well as decreased use of drugs or alcohol before sex, and increased school attendance among the student population. It also reduces pregnancy and STIs, and it actually delays the onset of sexual activity among teens. We know this. It improves body image for students and kids. It leads to better overall interpersonal relationships, not just intimate relationships. So there's all sorts of evidence of really net positive benefits for this. Lastly, and this is maybe most important, research shows that sex education, like any other subject, is most effective when it builds. So when it starts with an early foundation. So in the K-6 range, it begins and then builds over time, right? With age appropriate things, of course. Everything that I saw when I looked through the details of the curriculum that Anna presented showed really age appropriate things, in my opinion. And it gives a foundation for kids to be able to have control over their own bodies and to be empowered to speak up when something that's not right is going on. So thank you, Dr. Anna, for presenting such a well-informed, well-researched curriculum. I really encourage you guys to consider adopting it, of course, with opt-out options for those that are not comfortable. I would much rather have it adopted with an opt-out so that parents like myself can opt in for our children than have it just be completely sidelined because some, small minority is uncomfortable with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Our next speaker is J.R. Corsi.
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for letting us be here, and of course, you folks on this side. Some of the sentiments that were spoken, I feel strongly about. I'm here to, I'm off the cuff too. My wife usually proofs this stuff, so I might get in trouble. But anyway, first of all, I don't feel that the community has had enough time to review our upcoming agenda. 2 weeks or a few days to get ready for a meeting like this is too short amount of time. I would also like to know, is this curriculum evidence-based? I'm not really sure where we get to teach our children about sex. I think we're over-sexing our kids. Possibly some of these conspiracy theories are true. I never used to think that we were, this was a conspiracy-based agenda, but now over-sexing our kids, obviously it's not a conspiracy. It's happening right now. I used to think it was. I'd also like to know if Dr. Rodriguez signed off on this. And were there other options to look into besides these? What are our choices? I kind of feel like this is being shoved down our throat. Now, you guys also admit that this is a very controversial topic, but you only give us a little time to get ready for this 13 levels of curriculum. And how can we question it? I'm confused myself because the link is confusing. You can't find your way around the link. I go into it, I walk away lost. I found some things like private parts, kindergarten is being taught private parts. I don't think this is okay. I would like to know who picked and adopted the team, who was on the team, and was it open to all who wanted to contribute, or was it a hand-picked team picked by our executive leader? And did we get any input from our local doctors, pediatricians, and psychiatrists? I'm concerned about this. Who wrote this agenda? I don't like it. And you say, now this is, everyone has talked about this opt-out deal, and this is very important to me. It's not a real option, as was proven to us just a few weeks ago by the Basalt School for the 5th and 6th graders. They went to Taka, which we signed a permission slip, and we had a review of the movies, the short films, Kids Fest, that these films were going to be shown. One of which was My Mommy Has a Mustache. There was another one talking about God, is God a man or a woman? A non-binary flick. And there was another one where some kids had a bus driver end up dating a lady, and that's not okay for a lot of people, for their children to be introduced to this. We didn't opt out. We were tricked. They swapped the short films on us. So anyway, overall, in closing, I'd just like to say that, I'm really concerned about the child suicide rate in this valley. And are we confusing our children? Are the parents confusing the children? And most of all, I want the children to know in the future, when they wonder why we messed them up, that my name was against this over sexualizing our children. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ashley Stahl.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for everything tonight. As you mentioned, my name is Ashley Stahl, and I am a community member, an expectant parent, a board member for our local chapter of PFLAG, a 15-year-long youth mentor, and a current youth mentor with both PFLAG and the Buddy program. And I'm here today to speak both on behalf of myself and on behalf of PFLAG in support of the Comprehensive Health and Human Sexuality curriculum. We support the entirety of the changes being proposed today, but I'm going to use my time to speak on the element that I have the most personal experience with and the element that's most important to myself and my organization, and that is making health class more inclusive, gender expansive, and LGBTQ plus students and their needs. My perspective's been informed by my own personal experience as a transgender woman, living and working in this valley, my years of mentoring and working with youth, and my experience working with the very LGBTQ plus students that this decision will impact most and their families, some of whom have made the decision not to be present today because of their desire to protect themselves and their families from the thinly veiled hate that you are hearing this evening. To me, this decision's a no-brainer, regardless of the opinions of some of those in this room. Our community is a beautiful mixture of kids from all ends of the gender and sexuality spectrum. If we care for the kids in our community, then we need to provide all of them with the tools that they will need to keep themselves safe. Study after study has shown the effectiveness of educating our children about these topics, but we undermine that effectiveness when we exclude one group from that education. The role of a public education system is precisely that, to provide equal education to every child. And if you fail to adopt these changes, then you'll be denying a portion of your student body access to the same information that you're providing their cisgender and heterosexual peers. So you will continue to hear all kinds of perspectives. You'll hear that this isn't age appropriate, despite the curriculum being intentionally and specifically designed to be age appropriate. You will hear that this is something that should be left to parents to teach, but there's an opt-out option. You'll hear that maybe taxpayer dollars shouldn't be spent on this, despite the fact that public schooling is meant to be schooling for all, and we all pay those tax dollars. So I just ask that today you look past those thinly veiled arguments for what they are, and you look towards educating all of our children equally in this community. We can't allow a small but vocal group of people to prevent equal access to health education within our community and with our tax dollars. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lorna Littner.
My name is Lorna Littner. You let me know.
If you can just stay close to the mic for the people on Zoom.
I like standing up there than sitting down. I just a little context. I am a part-time resident of Valley, and my work has been as a sexuality educator, mostly in New York City. I feel very strongly about the need to provide basic education to children. The whole idea, I think, of this curriculum in particular, but most well thought out and conceived curriculums, is to foster conversation between children and parents. And one way of doing that is providing opportunities for parents to play a very prominent role in supporting and engaging in conversation with their children. And these kinds of curriculums foster that kind of conversation, I think. Schools should not be the primary sexuality educators of children. Parents should be, but several people have talked very passionately about the fact that unfortunately, many parents do not engage in these conversations for a variety of reasons that are oftentimes not objective or supported by data. One of the speakers talked about a study, many studies that show that sexuality education provides a foundational understanding that is essential for children if we accept that sexuality is a part of who we are as people. If we withhold information from children, it's not going to make their curiosity about sex and sexuality go away. What it's going to do is just create a need for them to go to other sources to find out and satisfy their curiosity. Unfortunately, there's a lot of easy access to inaccurate and dangerous information. And there are many studies that show, especially for kids who are computer literate, that pornography is oftentimes the primary sexuality educator of children, because schools and working in tandem with parents just don't step up, or they wait until junior high school, or they are reluctant to talk about and provide a forum to engage in conversations about topics that are frankly, they are difficult to talk about. Many of us came from environments where we didn't have the opportunity.
You're out of time. If you can wrap up. Yeah, thank you.
As you can tell, I'm very passionate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Our next speaker is Melvin Littner.
I have about 3 hours of comments, but I'm going to limit it to a few minutes based on what I heard. I'd like to first say that I totally support Dr. Cole and her curriculum. I've been a sexuality educator for 50 years. 50. I've worked with every age and every disability and every level of professional connected with children. I'd like to say that I'd like to re-emphasize how important it is that teachers are trained not only in the information, but as Dr. Cole emphasized, with the feelings, and I would add that they would be trained in a skill set. How do you respond to a child who asks something that you're not expecting them to ask? I would also encourage the board to make opportunities for parents available. We're making an assumption here that parents who teach the curriculum you may give them are competent, capable, and comfortable. That's not a fair assumption. Parents need to be given the opportunity to be trained in order to successfully help their children. My last comment I didn't intend to make, but it's really in reference to the people that talked about abuse. And as one who's worked with preschool and early elementary kids, when we give them the tools, as Lorna said, when we teach them about their body parts and who can touch them and under what circumstances, they are far less likely to experience the horrors that were described earlier on. So it's not withholding, it's giving them the tools. And you need, as Lorna said, to start very early on. Because so many young children are abused. So many, 4 to 6 year olds. Thanks for hearing me, and I hope you'll follow up with training the teachers and parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Michael Cervini.
I think there's a lot of things that have been said here that probably go a little bit further than the quote unquote sex ed. My heart goes out to the individuals who talked about fentanyl death and sexual abuse. Horrific things that should never happen. And I was thinking about this gentleman talking about that. And I do believe there's a time and place to talk about certain specific things. But I do not believe the time and place in a curriculum that is particularly focused on this transgender LGBTQ agenda is not appropriate as a curriculum from K through 12 on a daily basis. I think about this term opt-out. My boy, I have a boy in 6th grade. We have opted him out, and there is no opt-out. Let's be honest. This is agenda-based curriculum that is being forced on our kids, whether they want it or not, whether I want it or not. So the fact that when we say opt-out, there is no opt-out. I really wish, I heard the comment that for every one parent who's against this, there's 3 for it. Well, I'm here to believe, and I'm here to tell you, I believe there's a silent majority that don't want this, that we respect teachers, but we also want the teachers to respect us as parents, what we feel is important to our kids. So I hear a lot about opt-out, sexualizing these kids. I totally believe that the problem we have in this world can be solved by one, love one another, accept everyone. But I don't believe that I have to have my kids go along with this highly sexualized content that is being forced on us. So I just want you guys to understand that we as parents know our kids and we love our kids. We certainly hope you love our kids, but I have questions regarding that, knowing what I've been through and dealing with teachers here in this community. And I just want you to know I'm speaking as a person who once was an educator many decades ago. And I just hope that you guys can appreciate us as parents and let us be the parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yolanda Melendez. She's not here. Our last speaker is Keely Lloyd.
planning on speaking, but I guess I made the last cut, so I'll do my best here. I mean, I hear a lot of love for our children from every side of the spectrum and concern about suicide. I do want to touch on the points about communication, just because I feel like as a parent, I get so many text emails. It's a bus route or a math lesson or whatever it is, and then a letter from the superintendent comes out, and there's several, which is appreciated. But to have this content buried in there, I feel like it was buried. I had to ask multiple times for help from different parents to guide me towards this. I had no idea this was a curriculum that was being voted on. And there were several teachers I spoke to that didn't seem to know about it either. So when you say there were meetings called and only a couple of people showed up, or we have 5,000 students, and you spoke to 30 or 40 families, I think you said, I'm an entrepreneur, I run my own company. If I only had that kind of feedback from 5,000 people, I would be concerned about what am I doing on my end for communication. I'm not getting a response. I hear that you're saying you're trying, but what can we do to make that more clear? Can the board be clear when I'm getting a text? I get lots of texts from political parties or trying to sell me something that say vote yes, vote no. Here's the attached curriculum. Can you make it clearer for parents so that when we get that, we're not sifting through so much, so that that's just very transparent. It's right there. Vote yes, vote no. Here's our feedback, instead of just having it be that small part of a superintendent letter. We talked about the opt-in and opt-out. I'm a little confused why we've decided that we have to be the opt-out versus people opting in. I don't know where that number came from, why the opt-out is a lesser number. And that leads to the budget. Okay, so this is a new curriculum and you're going to spend the budget on, which I don't know what this costs. What money is being allotted for my student that opts out? Right now, I know it's an option to go to the library and read a book. So if we're going to spend funding to educate everyone that's wanting to learn about all of these sexual gender identity issues, what is the education being provided for my son if he's opting out? I know that's a question I've heard from other parents. This time goes by way too fast. I liked your idea about giving resources to parents for K-5 and then talking about it for the older kids possibly, but then how do you educate all these teachers? That's more funding. That's so much pressure on teachers. You're splitting the curriculum. You've got 5 kids opting out. You have 16 kids in the classroom. That's a lot to navigate. So I do think the board needs a lot more time and a lot more parental input. I would ask for that. I would love more time to research this. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who came to speak tonight. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break and then we will reconvene. Do you need to make a motion to do that? We're going to resume. The time is 8:42 PM. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our previous board meeting, and approval of proposed policies DEA, DEB, DFA/DFAA, JL and JLCDA. GBGG was pulled and will be added to our next agenda. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off of the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented. As amended.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me.
Call to vote?
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Torres,
Aye.
Director Tyler,
Aye.
motion passes.
The next business in order is action on the resolution establishing board member compensation. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the resolution establishing board member compensation as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's now time for board discussion. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share any comments, and we will begin with Director Torres.
So I was trying, to really focus on some of the things I wanted to point out in this resolution, and reading the public comments that were written saying, you're in this for yourselves, and you're doing this for all the money, and you're doing this to get paid, and this is a volunteer role. And, it has absolutely changed in the last few years, the dynamics of being on a school board. There were comparisons to school volunteers that are, working concessions that, why should board members get paid and not volunteers? And I can say that when I, at least speaking for myself, when I approached this position, it sat vacant for months. I ran unopposed. I did this because I came with an open mind and a heart that just wanted to do what was best for our community. And my profession in higher ed, truly it was led because I believe in the power of education. And it has become so difficult to be a school board member when the first things that you're met with is criticism and judgment and attacks on social media and all of these things. That there's reasons that Saturday Night Live has created skits about school board meetings and the national headlines that school boards are in right now. And I would say this is a small compensation to try and get folks in our community to be a part of this work for the right reasons, to not come to this role for their own political agenda, but rather to come with an open heart, an open mind, and to do something that they truly believe in, and that's best for our community. So I wanted, as best as I could, to really capture that I think this work's important, and by no means do I think that this is a way to get rich.
Thank you. Director Tyler?
I would like to agree with what Natalie Torres says. I think it's also important to recognize that the intent of providing this money to be on the board is to hope to have better representation of people who having that little bit of money would be enough to be able to get them to do this job, whereas without it, they might not. And I think it can give us a broader representation of people on the board by having that money offered. And I think it's hard in a sense because it's always been thought of as a volunteer position. And I understand that. And I think that's okay. But it's also written in here that anybody who would like to continue to have it as a voluntary position can forfeit the payment. And then also just to make sure it's clear that none of us will benefit from this payment unless we decide to run again. And so it's not like we are doing this for ourselves, but as a future board.
Director Stepp?
You just said what I was going to say. Yeah, originally I was not in favor of this, and I didn't think that even this amount of money would make a difference to help people run. But the argument that, you know, it could help to pay for gas, it could help to pay for a babysitter or something, and maybe that will open it up to some people. And, you know, looking around the country, I mean, some school boards get a lot of money, you know, I'm thinking of like the big districts in LA and New York, like they get like what would be considered a normal full-time salary. So that, you know, the $5,000 is very small. And so I back to what Director Torres was saying is that, you know, that's not why you join it. You join it because you want to make a difference, and you join it because you believe in public education. And at times it really helped to say, we're a volunteer board and we're doing our best, and, you know, so that kind of takes away that argument a little bit, but I don't want to vote no for future boards, and kind of what Director Heitler was saying is that this is not for us, this is for future boards. And if they can opt out, we're just talking about opting in or out. So having that option is, I think, important. And it, you know, if I were to continue on the board, I would do that, because I don't agree with the payment, but it's not up to me. So I don't want to limit the possibilities for future board members.
Director Ramirez.
I think, you know, just in recognizing that, Director Torres and I are the first Latinas on this board, you know, the fact that we have tried so hard to have a representative board, a representative table of leaders that can help the progress of our district, in this time and day where we recognize inflation as an issue, we recognize gas, everything, even babysitters, everything that's going up. I really see this not as compensation, but support for any leader who wants to be in this role, who wants to advocate for students, who wants to make a difference in our district, because it is so hard sometimes to be able to drop everything as a parent to be able to be here. And I know that I have stressed thanking our spouses and our families for the time that we have given. And I've been on this board with Director Torres and Director Stepp for almost 4 years, and we are coming to a place now where we are all making decisions. And, you know, I think at the core of that is like, is this sustainable for board members in this day and age to stay, and for our families to be in this space of like, you know, where we have to give so much more extra time, where we have had situations, especially during the superintendent search, where many of us put in a lot more hours than, you know, we have, that I think that we ever imagined, for sure, and still be volunteers in our kids' schools. And so, you know, I really feel like this opens the door for people to at least feel supported in being able to say, I want to commit to a 4-year term where I can at least afford the gas to get me to the district office, or the babysitter, or dinner for my family. Because it does take up a lot of our time. And if this is a small thing we can do for future leaders in our district, that still going to be tasked and all of the things, I am in full support of it. And I hope that we continue to have representation at this table that makes such important decisions for the future of our district.
I just want to provide a little background on this. This is not the first time this is before this board. A statute was passed last year at the state level, which allowed for board compensation, the maximum somewhere around 35 grand a year. It's a per diem. And this has already come before the board twice in policy readings. The resolution is the last step in this process. So this has been before the board publicly for a couple of months now, and we've had conversations on it. I've been in full support of this from the get-go because I think that this takes some of the barriers out of service. If I am taking time out of my day working and I am an hourly employee, I am losing wages. If I am here and I need to pay for childcare, that's money out of my pocket. The people at this table are privileged and supported in a way that not everyone in our community would be to participate in this role. And for me, this small stipend could hopefully help to offset the costs of service, because there are very real costs of service in this important role. And with 3 seats up for election this fall, I from the get-go felt that this was important for this board to address for future boards. So I just wanted to share that and also echo everything that my fellow board members have said. This is not an easy role to sit in. Our district population is comparable to some of our municipalities, and those positions are paid at a much higher rate. This has traditionally been a volunteer role, but as things have shifted and as politics have affected the dynamics of the board and the relationship with the community and the district, I think that it's important to ensure that there is at least an offset of costs. So I do support this final step in this process, and did support both policy reads as well. So we're now going to jump into 5 minutes of open discussion. Dr. Rodriguez has asked to speak during this time, as long as no one is opposed to that.
Thank you. I actually just wanted to say that I want to encourage and express my support and our team's support for you all to pass the resolution. It's been interesting, especially I think recently, when we think about the importance of school district governance. We have 3 seats that are open November of 2023, and today, and that's 6 months away. And today we have 0 candidates for each of those 3 seats. And one of the things that I imagine is that people out there see what you all go through, the public scrutiny that you go through, generally sometimes being berated every other week in public. And I say that because, as Dr. Cole mentioned earlier, there's a lot of diversity of opinion in this valley, and it's always going to be split, right? So whether you support the curriculum adoption, folks are going to be upset about that. If you reject it, folks are going to be upset about that. And y'all are going to hear about it here, right? That's every other week. But you also hear about it in the hundreds of emails that you get, right? You also hear about it on the walks that you go on in the coffee chats, and you read it on social media. And quite frankly, I'm afraid that folks see that and say, like, why would I sign up for that? The $5,000 is a very small token of, hey, it's not going to be easy, but at least you'll get reimbursed for your gas, or at least you can cover a babysitter, or, make up wages for lost time. And so I just wanted to express to you all my support, our team support, my encouragement that you support this. And again, acknowledging that none of the 5 of them will benefit immediately if they do pass it, right? The only way that any of them would benefit from it is if Dr. Stepp, Director Ramirez, Director Torres decide to run for re-election in November and get re-elected and choose to accept any reimbursements. They don't have to. They could be re-elected and say, I don't need to accept the reimbursement. For Directors Tytler and Director Kuhlenberg, they need to wait 2 years, run for re-election, be re-elected, and then decide whether they want to accept it or not. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear to the public. I don't know if y'all have met Taylor Kramer. He's our new guy on the beat at the Post Independent. Welcome to the fun world of covering board meetings. Yeah, and so I just again wanted to express my support for you all.
Thanks for that. Is there any further board discussion on this?
I just wanted to add that it was really important for us to include official board activities. That not just include our board meetings, but serving as designated representatives of the board for schools and committees and things that we do out of the community. That was something that we added to our scope of work this year. That I feel like it was a long time coming for us to be able to get to a place where we could engage with our schools in the district. And I feel like all of us have made a commitment now for us and for future boards to be not just as stewards of public tax dollars in our district and for the benefit of our students, but also to be able to interact in the community and to be present and like visual representatives of the district when we're out, you know, whether it's doing reading on a Friday morning at 8 a.m. or attending an accountability meeting for one of our schools, or you know, going to a presentation from sixth graders at one of our schools. Like, we have made a commitment to be out and present, and I think being able to include that in this policy and the resolution really emphasizes the fact that this isn't just for us to like be paid for board meetings. Like, it's because we're doing more and we've committed to really be present and be create opportunities for the community to interact with us.
2 seconds. We are always available to interact with us. And I would just emphasize, please not approach our children. That has happened. It has happened since we've started, and our kids are not the conduit, nor should they be the people that adults contact when they are trying to get their point to us. So I thought this might be a good opportunity just to remind folks.
And I would say that extends to spouses also.
Yes. Thank you. All right, can you call to vote?
Aye. Maris.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Torres.
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next business in order is action on 2 health-related policies. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. The policies are JLCE and JLCEA. Do I have a motion to start?
I move that the board approve policies JLCE and JLCEA as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, we will begin discussion with Director Tyler.
I guess I just want to double check that there is some kind of planning in place, or will there be some planning in place, as I had asked about last time, about first aid and emergency medical care as that gets started? What is going, like, if we can be updated prior to the next school year and being told what kind of steps have been taken by the school district to make sure that teachers are getting that training, so they're not in a place where they'll be out of compliance in the many ways in which that could occur. So.
Right, and I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right, like, yes, in compliance without an additional lift, like with as much ease as possible to reach that.
Correct. Something at the beginning of the school year in the 6 or 7 days that have trainings, or something, just so that when you walk to the park with your class, you're not out of compliance, or when you go on a field trip or something along that nature, and then the teachers aren't, again, being asked to do something in their own time out of their pocket to make that happen. Thank you.
Director Step.
I don't really have any questions about these two. I'm wondering if you know, and just hearing a lot in the past couple meetings about the sexual assaults that happen in bathrooms. Like, do we address any of that in any of our health policies, or I don't know where it would be addressed, but it's just, that could be a parking lot issue because it's not about these, but I don't know if it belonged here or not.
Those would be in the J policies because student discipline.
Right.
Okay, thanks. I don't have any questions about these.
Director Ramirez.
I don't have any questions either.
Neither do I.
Neither do I.
Oh, sorry. Went around the table. Sorry, Director Torres.
Great.
5 minutes for open discussion if anyone has anything to add. We call to vote, and this is on the second of 3 readings, so these will appear one more time.
Director Step,
Aye.
Director Ramirez,
Bye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Torres,
Aye.
Director Tyler,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. The next business in order is discussion on policies relating to physical interventions and medically necessary treatment. These are policies JKA, regulation JKA-R, and policy GLCDC. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We'll begin with Director Step.
I don't have a question about the policy, but I'm just curious if how often is this type of intervention needed? Is it, how often is this policy needed?
Yeah, so they, the reports get sent to me every year. And keep in mind, these were for over 5 minutes. So as we are changing the restraint to 1 minute, I don't have that data between 1 and 4 minutes, obviously. So last year I received 2 reports. And so that was the frequency of that.
Thanks.
Director Ramirez.
I had a question in regards to the 1 to 5 minutes language, and I know we talked about this during policy committee and making sure that everything was in alignment. I guess I just and I might have asked this during policy committee, but who is keeping time of the 1 to 5 minute?
Without getting into a full training of CPI and the protocols, it's usually, there's always a person with a witness. So there's always 2 people. Best practice and what we encourage are 3 people in case there needs to be a 2-person hold. And so that is that 3rd person or the other person would be keeping track of that time. And it is literally taking a stopwatch out and tracking it.
Okay. And everyone is trained from our team currently or will be trained?
So currently we use what's called CPI, Crisis Prevention Institute's guidelines. We have a certified trainer do the training throughout the year. If we can't get our staff trained by that particular trainer that works with our district, we have options to send them to the BOCES in Rifle to get the same training. So anybody that goes on a call like that would be trained and would have that certification, which are good for 2 years.
And is everyone on our staff trained up to date?
No, so not everybody on our staff is trained. Typically it is our principals, assistant principals, special ed staff, and some mental health staff.
Is there
And paras.
Is
Yeah.
there a timeline for everyone to be updated and trained, or is there a time like once you start employment where you then have to be trained within a certain time range?
So within a particular position, it would be a part of that person's role. So a science teacher may not need to get trained, so that would not be the expectation. But paras or those folks that I just listed who would be a part of the team at a school would be certified. that is part of their onboarding and part of the expectations through interviews, especially with our para staff. Usually our teachers know that this is part of their role when it comes to special education. But our para staff may not be aware of that kind of responsibility.
And they also have to be renewed. So
Every 2 years.
And who's in charge of making sure everybody's renewed? Up to date?
Well, it's kind of like CPR. So the person's in charge of their own licensure. And then we do keep track of it with Heather is our trainer for that. And so she keeps track of that and those certifications come to me, but I'm not keeping track to say, hey, by the way, you need to get this updated. It is the employee's responsibility to make sure that they are certified.
Director Torres.
So that was one of my questions. So thank you for asking, was who's timing? Secondly, was on JKA, the seclusion room. It says the student must continually be monitored. The seclusion room must have at least one window to monitor students when the door is closed. Or if that is not available, then there must be a video camera in place. Is there a secondary seclusion room? I'm wondering if there is a student in the seclusion room and it's occupied and there is a need for use. Is there a secondary space that meets this criteria that can be used, or has that ever happened?
Has it ever happened? Probably. I don't know when that has happened. So that issue could come up, but that would be a theoretical challenge. Seclusion happens less frequently than restraint. So we had 2 restraints last year and 0 seclusions. So some schools, and I would say in particular, our effective needs program has a space that meets the criteria with the window and things like that. There's no video for any of our spaces. So it is just with the window and the expectation on how to use that seclusive space. If that was full, I don't have a good answer for, the what then.
I just want to add the restraint is after a series of other de-escalation strategies have already taken place. Like I was at a school today and I witnessed an outburst from a student. The principal very successfully was able to de-escalate the student, calm them down. And so that, that's outlined in the regulation in terms of expected steps that need to be taken before restraint is in an intervention that's used.
Didn't answer your question about that second space. No, though they're not there's not a school that I know that has an extra space like that.
Well, I think in answering to when you had one case that happened last year, obviously that's reflective of this isn't a common occurrence, let alone to have a need for 2. But I think, if that one occurrence would have happened, to just have somebody be aware that this room is occupied. If something were to happen, be aware that the space is being used. But it sounds like that's obviously not happening as common enough, luckily, to be an issue.
Yeah, and we have some schools that just have 3 certified team members. So like if they were all occupied, is another challenge into that what if world. And certainly we're encouraging all schools to have at least 3 or more. So.
Thank you.
Director Tyler.
Thank you. I have a question on the 1-minute hold and the 5-minute hold and the language that is in JKA. And I'm curious as why in the 1-minute hold it says the notice should be given verbally. It says that in the 5-minute hold that the notification should be in the primary language, but on the 1-minute hold, it doesn't say anything about primary language. Is that just because it's not added?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jasmine was on that, so we definitely need to update that.
Okay. And then and I should have done better note taken on where I grabbed this, but it was somewhere in this category. But it says 9B1 staff memo on child protection policy. It says that it gets, when they're hired, they get this, and then like every 3 years after that, like how is that done for staff? So like every 3 years, they're learning about this? Is it just like it's done within every 3 years? And so if somebody's hired, then within 3 years after that, they're given the next training that they need? It says all employees shall receive training regarding the reporting obligations under state law in the orientation training when hired, and every 3 years after that. So I'm just curious, like, what are the logistics of how that training is done? It was in 9B1, staff memo on child protection policy. And I don't remember where I grabbed that, but
I think that is the next
oh,
item.
my bad.
That's JLF.
Got me nervous.
I'll ask the question next time. Sorry.
You good? Kim?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you both for all your work on this. I'm sorry I couldn't be at policy committee, but thank you for taking my comments and inserting them. I think I still have the same concern about verbally notifying parents, just the barrier to doing that. I don't know if that's something that we face often, but putting in policy that they will be notified does still concern me versus should, because if you can send an email and you've satisfied the statutory requirement for written notice, there isn't a statutory requirement for verbal notice. I think we should be doing that, but if you can't get a hold of anyone, then you're out of compliance with policy. And I would prefer not to put us in a position where that can happen. So I would advocate for changing both to should be verbally notified versus will in the longer than 5 minutes, with an emphasis or even stronger than that, like every effort should be made to give verbal notification, something to that effect, but the will be verbally notified. We're going above and beyond the statute, but I just don't want to, again, put us in that situation of not being able to adhere to policy. And then I appreciate having JKR before us. It's still, I think that, oh, great. Okay. The numbering was fixed. I just want us to make sure that the numbering and bullets all make sense, because it does change the meaning of it. And it's such an oddly formatted regulation, and that there are so many letters and numbers and things that impact the subsequent clauses. And so I just want us to take a second look and hopefully make sure that there aren't any more of those that are off. But thank you both for your work on it. We're not taking action on this tonight. This is just a first read. So we have 5 minutes for open discussion, but no vote on these tonight.
So I'll admit that it was, I believe, but I might be mistaken, but remembering this, that it was at my direction for the will. We had a conversation about really aiming, especially when your child has been restrained, to try our very best to notify parents and to make contact. And I believe we did it for the longer than 5 minutes and not the less than 5 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
that's the way that it is in here right now. It's should under the less than 5 minutes, but will with over 5 minutes.
And I think the reasoning for that is, I mean, you know, I've seen students restrained in our school, and I understand that our staff is, you know, has to be trained and everything, but I feel like it's, as a parent, something that I would want to be notified. And, you know, we did have that conversation of like, to what extent, you know, are we trying and like how often? And I think we came to an agreement that it was going to be like part of the regulation of like where they decide where that, you know, that commitment to get in contact with the parent, like, oh, you know, if they don't answer the first day, then are they calling in 2 days or what is that? But I still feel like it's super important if your child's been restrained longer than 5 minutes, that they don't find that you don't find out from your child.
I agree. And I just, again, like there are just barriers to that verbal conversation. And then I have concerns about like, if I leave a voicemail, is that sufficient? Or do I have to actually have a conversation? And I want it to be clear in the policy what the expectations are. So I think I would advocate for language that's like, I don't know, we'll make a documented and concerted effort to verbally notify or something along those lines. I think you can have the principal who's made 8 calls throughout the day and they've never been able to get through. then they're out of compliance with policy, right? And that's my concern when we're looking at it from like a purely policy side. I 100% agree that we should absolutely be verbally notifying parents if their child's been restrained. So I have no, I'm not differing from you on that. I just want to make sure that our policy mirrors, the possibilities, I guess, of what's happening. So
I did write that down as another question, so I'm so glad that you're mentioning it. The idea of must for anything over 1 minute verbally. And I mean, I'm guilty of this too. Voice messages that my voice mailbox is full.
Right.
You couldn't leave a message in some cases until I'm like, oh, I haven't checked my voicemails in a while, and I would hate for that to be a situation where I've tried everything. They're just not available. And
Right.
so I think that's an important distinction.
that's why I'm wondering if like a documented and concerted effort, like something where they've documented, we've called this many times throughout the day and haven't been able to get through. Does that satisfy the spirit of what we're trying to capture here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, as long as I don't know, and that's the hard part, because, I think at the end of the day, like, I don't doubt that our team would make a concerted effort. And, like, even us, right? Like, we're on a Zoom call, we can't pick up. But I still think there has to be especially if it's longer than 5 minutes, like, I feel like there has to be a commitment from our district to say, we're gonna make, like, even if it's by text or by remind app or whatever, that we have communicated and heard back from the parent that they have received our message. That to me is really important. And I'm open to us having a discussion, obviously, on this if we feel otherwise, but I feel like it's, for me, especially as a parent of a kid with special needs, which, like, haven't heard of that ever happened, but still, like, I can think of moms in the community, in my school district, in the district community, moms that I have coffee with, that, like, I would hate for them to be like, I didn't know. Nobody told me, or my kid told me. So
I think we're all on the same page and we all have the same intent. Does that give you all enough direction to kind of massage that language a little bit? Okay, thank you.
And the only thing I wanted to add was in your regulations on notification requirements, if you could please add the primary language as well. I think that'd be important for you guys. Under E. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
The next business in order is discussion on the policy and regulation for reporting child abuse. Policies JLF and regulation JLF-R. The agenda notes that this will be the final read of JLF-R, but I propose that we do not take action on this tonight and we pass them simultaneously with the second read of JLF. So there will not be a vote on either tonight. Is there any opposition to that? Okay. Thank you, Chief Cole. So we will begin with the discussion with Director Ramirez.
Yeah, so in policy committee, we kind of went over, and you guys were gonna follow up regarding the parent mentors and other staff that might pertain to other organizations that are regularly with their kids. Is there an update on that?
You bet. So the question that came up in policy committee was, should we include volunteers as mandatory reporters? And we're clarified that the state statute would not include volunteers at all. And so we would be going further than the state statute requires. Our current volunteer agreement does talk about concerns about abuse and neglect, and stipulates that volunteers need to communicate that with the supervisor point of contact. Our concerns about including it here and going further, requiring volunteers to do it in the capacity of mandatory reporter training for volunteers, and where we draw the line with volunteers who are working at a basketball game ticket booth to volunteers who are parent mentors. Now, I will say, like, parent mentors do go through because the way their program is set up, but so it didn't feel like we need to put it in policy, given the way the practice seems to be addressing those gray areas.
I think, I think that was, you know, and I understand obviously that we have volunteers who are there, you know, maybe for a basketball game. But I do think, you know, we have volunteers, and I'm glad the paramentors do it, but, you know, I'm thinking about like Voices or, you know, other orgs that we work with. And so I would just hope that our team stresses to them that we would obviously like for them to have the training as well. But overall, I think I'm okay with the language in our policy and regulation.
Director Torres.
I have no questions. I think that there was a lot of thought and great suggestions, and I appreciate all the work that the policy committee and group put into this. So thank you for your time.
Director Teitler.
Any guesses on my question, Anna? I was questioning about how that 3 years works, where after they're hired, they get this training, and then every 3 years, is it just, it's just made sure that that happens for the whole staff within 3 years? Is that how that happens?
Yeah, I mean, it helps, correct me if I'm wrong, but it pops up for principals every year as a, like, from, actually, we go to it. That says, do your managerial reporter training, cue your staff, and it's a reminder that they get every year that they put in front of staff for managerial reporter. And it's an online training. And so that's how they kind of update it. And they, my understanding of the way they give them time. If you haven't done it, go do it. And so it's a year, like they're reminding staff on a yearly basis.
Great, thank you.
Director Stepp.
I can't find where it was. I was looking at it. And it's about contacting the child's family. And was any thought, or is there anything in here about if the abuse, if the suspected abuse is coming from someone other than the family, are you still not allowed to contact the family, or?
That's super tricky. Our job is not to investigate.
Just report it.
So we try to really coach staff to say it's not your job to prove, it's not your job to document, it's not your job to do anything with it. So we report and that's a THS. It gets really sticky with communication.
But that's what DHS handles. Okay. No, I don't have any other questions.
I don't have any follow-up either. I'm assuming that this regulation, I just think that last clause in the policy that the superintendent will submit such procedures as are necessary for the board for approval to accomplish the intent of this policy, just extremely broad in my mind. So what level of procedures are we requiring you all to submit to us for approval? Clearly the regulations associated with it, but it's not super clear. So I would just flag that as something that we should consider before final read if we want to tweak that language. But I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Change the language.
Can I just clarification on that? Do you think that we should, I mean, we developed a protocol that's refined, that aligns to kind of some different documentation. With that, that's what came to my mind. If that's what would be submitted, do you want this to be narrowed and more specific? Do you want it?
I just think that's a conversation that has to be had amongst the superintendent and staff to see where that line is.
Okay.
I think this is just extremely broad, like any such procedures to achieve the intent of this policy is, I mean, the intent is to prevent abuse, right? And to stop abuse that can be very broad. So I just think we should flag that for consideration and to look at it a little closer.
Yeah, I think we should probably change the procedures to maybe regulation. And I think one of the things that's different is that you all don't need to approve all regulations. There's just certain ones that you do. And this is one that we think might be worthwhile for you all to look at as a regulation.
Is this mandatory clause from CASB recommendation or is this from statute? Do we know?
I would need to look into that.
Okay.
Because otherwise you would be fine with deleting it.
I didn't say that, but I am curious if it's statutory or CASB recommendation so that we can know a little more. But yeah. Okay. Okay, we have 5 minutes of open discussion. If anyone has anything else on this policy and regulation.
I just wanted to ask if we could, I'm sorry, I missed it, the reports to the family, we could add in their primary language.
We don't.
I don't think there's reporting to the family in this. This is just reports to
It says will not report to the family.
DSHS.
It doesn't say report to child abuse or name and address of the child, family or informant or any other identified. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's us communicating to DHS.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you guys also for bringing regulations before us, because I know this isn't something that we've done historically in our district. And I think it's important for us to be able to see that you guys are not only implementing the policy, but in how you're doing it. So I very much appreciate our effort as a district to bring forward regulations and like how that's aligned in that way.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
No.
But you're welcome.
I mean, this one.
Yeah.
we need to do this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This is an important one. Yeah. Any other discussion on this? Thank you. The next business in order is board reports and comments. We will begin with Director Torres.
Yeah, so first I want to start, I apologize that I was off the meeting for the Roaring Fork Foundation was actually rescheduled. So I thought that they had met. We actually rescheduled the meeting and I was able to attend, and it was last week. And there were a couple of things that they asked I bring to you all. If the Roaring Fork Schools Foundation was to evolve. So right now it's really a pass-through entity that is designed for grant writing and receiving funds for pre-collegiate, for the Family Resource Center. And so it currently does not have our superintendent as an attendee or on the board. If there was an evolution and that were to expand and there was outreach to better, receive grants to serve our district needs or provide grant funding to teachers and staff or whatever that evolution may be, that we discussed maybe the next step to saying, hey, now might be the time for maybe not the superintendent, but perhaps a designee or both. Whatever is the best fit. But that was a question to us as a board, if we want to really mull that over right now. Again, it's not quite as extensive that maybe it could grow to be. And if that were to happen, what would that involvement look like? Dave and Kelly are very open to coming back and having another follow-up. Thought that went really well. Shared that with the board and just expressing, here's where we're at, here's where we have been, how we have come into existence, and what we are currently tasked with doing. So if there is something that sparks that evolution, then they would come back. I'm on that board, involvement. I would say that that's an excellent opportunity to continue, even if you're, not on the school board, but to be a part of the work that they're doing. So something to think about. They also are going to explore maybe if there is an evolution that they would expand for more grant writing, and that would be outreach to the district to see where that benefit would come from. If there's a grant that requires it to go through a foundation, then that could be maybe the launching point to expanding what they do. So and then there is a bookkeeper that was hired to help so that Dave's not having to be responsible for that too. So it's a good meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Director Tytler.
I sat in on a Meadowood housing meeting, and the town was said in the last meeting that they would be approving a reviewer for Meadowood, which is good news because we were waiting on that to see whether the state was going to be the reviewer, the town was going to be the reviewer, and the town didn't have a reviewer at that point to be able to do that. And that was sort of holding up the process a little bit, but they have, or we're looking to approve a reviewer, and that they will be issuing an MOU for us to begin the process. So hopefully that happens. And by the end of the month, which is just a few days away now, we should be getting all of our bids in. That would give us more of a hard dollar amount on what the expected costs will be. And they're hoping that they can lock those prices in for maybe a month to say, like, if we get started, is that going to be enough for us to move forward and be able to have that as a fixed price? So, but it all seems to be going well. They have a new framer that they're looking to incorporate, but it seems like everything's moving forward well with that.
Director Stepp?
So the BOCES board is meeting next week, and they're pretty much in the same stages of budget creation and approval. And that's it.
Director Ramirez?
So last meeting, I was chairing it, so I forgot completely what my board report was, and I wanted to take time today to do that. So I have been very lucky to attend Latino Advocacy Day, I believe 3 years now, with some of our students. This year we had some high schoolers from Glenwood Springs High School and some kiddos from Silver Elementary attend, and they shared some of their reflections with me via email that I wanted to share with our team. And you know, this experience historically, as our students have attended, has been paid by sponsors like Protégete, which is a nonprofit for the state of Colorado, Wilderness Workshop, who has a program called Defiende Nuestra Tierra, and Voces Unidas, who are all here locally and have paid for our students and their travel and their accommodations there at the Capitol to be able to interact with their legislators. So I just wanted to share some reflections. This one is from Hazy from Glenwood Springs High School. During my trip to Latino Advocacy Day, I was able to realize that there were bigger problems that are affecting us as a Latino community, especially in our valley, whether it came to school, housing, or overall daily occurrences that I may not have realized before. I felt extremely honored that I was able to relate with other people of similar backgrounds and cultures, people who were able to understand what I was experiencing without feeling judged. I was also able to meet people and members of organizations who are helping make changes and helping others realize what we as Latino community are going through. Not only that, but I was able to connect with my classmates who were also invited. We were able to talk to adults from a teen point of view about what we observe and go through at our own school that adults may not realize. I truly felt heard about my problems, and I was able to learn about what I can do now, as well as in the future, to continue to make positive changes in my community as a Latina. I also learned strategies when talking to representatives and senators about the issues in my area, whether it be about Latino problems or not, so that the elected officials could truly represent their appointed areas. I'm truly grateful that I was able to go on this trip and know that there are things that I can do as a high school student to better my community. I would be more than happy to do it again. So we had 9 students from Glenwood Springs High School. I was obviously, I'm always grateful to be able to be there with students. And so thank you to Counselor Funes for taking them and being their guide on this trip. I also just wanted to request, and I'm not sure if this exists or how we would find it at this point in time, but I'd be interested in us having a conversation around if an opt-in, opt-out policy exists, or if there is language around that in our current policies, I think that would be a good policy to come before this board, especially as we're having these conversations of what is the process and what are those regulations that would make sure that there is accountability in the opt-out process. That's it.
This is more of an update for the community. The board was able to chat today more about the housing task force, and we anticipate getting some information out within the next couple of days to those who have signed up to be a part of that. We're working on scheduling and dates, and we are hoping to have that information shared out and begin to engage in that work. And I feel like I had one more thing, and I'm really sorry, but I don't remember it right now. I'm hitting a wall. If I remember it, I will come back to it.
Okay.
Huh?
I forgot that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry, everyone. I forgot about the proclamation for Veteran Awareness Day is May 9th. We actually just moved our board meeting to May 9th. So I would, in a consensus of the board, obviously would like to pursue having a proclamation. Even though it'll be in the evening, I think it would be good, a good process for us to have for future boards, especially moving forward, to do ahead of time.
Is there any opposition to that? Director Ramirez, do you want to spearhead that effort? Great. Okay. Yeah, I talked about that last time. It was a wonderful training, and it's ongoing. So we're in the middle of classes for the next, I think we have 6 more weeks. But it is incredible just how complex education finance is. And they love to say that we're flexing our finance muscles, which we are. And yeah, it's been great so far. So I would encourage you, Director Tytler, to engage in the future if you have time. Future board members, I will encourage as well. And it was not that, it was something else, but I'll remember it eventually. Okay. We'll now move on to our final agenda item, appreciations, and we will start with Director Tytler.
I would like to appreciate all of the little things and extra things that go into the job of running schools in our district. I had the privilege of sitting in for the SAC meeting and the PTO meeting for CRES recently. And I know that's happening throughout all the schools in our district. And I just want to give a shout out, especially to Kendall Riley and Amy Brockman for the great job that they did running their meeting and the participation that they had. And would like to say that I think that they're doing a great job listening to their people that are at the meeting and asking for input and using that input to inform their decision making. And I just think that's a really great way of building community, and that they're doing a really good job with that. And just the job that the PTO is doing in supporting the teachers at the school. And I just think their meeting I sat in was a good example of what can be done as a community and being spearheaded by Amy and Kendall. So great job.
Director Stepp.
I want to appreciate Chief Bean for all the schedule changes that we're making you do. Thank you.
Director Ramirez.
I wanted to recognize some of our parent volunteers. It is volunteer month, and I wanted to make sure that I checked in with some of our schools to ask if there were any parents we should highlight. So GSES, Katie Langenheisen, Maria Samudio, Emily Poole-Greener, Jen Foxco, Gilberto Landeros, Norma Ponce, and Crystal McFarland. And I was going to add one parent that we heard from in the comments, Mandy Brennan. Thank you to all parents who give time to attend SAC meetings, STAC meetings, youth sports, reading, story time, all of the things that happen in our schools, including kinder registration. I think we as board members obviously want the school district to run and to function and have what it needs, but at the end of the day, our schools would not be able to do all they can without volunteers. So thank you to all of them. It's also Administrative Professionals Day, so I wanted to make sure to highlight that. So thank you to all of our admin in our schools and to our bus drivers, because our kids would not get to school without buses. So thank you.
Director Torres.
Well, I'm going to keep that going and send a shout out to our after prom volunteers and organizers. Prom is this weekend, and it's incredibly important for those kids to have a safe place to go. And I want to also recognize those that have put a tremendous amount of work. I can speak right now, at least with Glenwood Springs High School, since I will also be a blackjack dealer at the after prom until 2:30 a.m. Just saying. I wanted to shout out to Annie Bell. She was the overall event organizer. Tremendous amount of work. Brooke Sherrick, Decoration Committee, Dendy Heisel, Food and Beverage Committee, Melissa Goodman, Donations Committee, Jackie McMillan. I hope I said her name right, or their name right. Volunteer Committee, and a few more. I'm sorry. Gabby Bayo, Jen Dockery, and Rebecca Siegel. Thank you. Thank you. I am so incredibly honored, and I am happy that they are putting so much work into an event that's so important for our kids to be safe and have a lot of fun. And I won't embarrass my kid too much after prom.
My appreciations are in the same vein, but for the other end of our student spectrum, the younger ones, I wanted to give a shout out to all of the specials teachers, gen ed teachers that are putting in a lot of extra effort right now for our performances for our kinders, our first, our second graders. I have a second grade performance to go to tomorrow night, and I know that that is a lift to get all of them on the same page and in the same place, and moving bleachers and everything that goes into it. And on top of that, they're also packing in spring field trips, which, as fun as they are, I know from personal experience, take some extra work from taking out my preschoolers. They're incredibly important to our kids' education, getting them out of the classrooms, getting them out into the community. And I'm very grateful for that extra effort that our teachers, administrators, everyone within the buildings right now are putting in to make the end of the year exciting, fun, and to make the transition for all of our students into the next grade level an exciting time of year. So that is my appreciation for tonight. If there's no further business and no objection, the meeting will be adjourned. It is 9:44 p.m.